Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I hope I'm going live about now. I'm going to give you some big mark action to start off the stream while I'm halfway presentable after just getting off the train and changing at home. So I'm quite not at the top of my game, but I really thought I needed to keep my promise to stream this Sunday. And we do actually have some good content. We do have Mark Gurman's Power On newsletter, which released a couple of hours ago. And of course, we have the long awaited and now kind of dreaded collaboration between MKBHD and Mr. Who's the Boss. We're gonna get to what Marquez and Aaron have been up to. I'm not pleased, to say the least. I've seen it in parts and I've seen people's reactions. So I am keeping mostly an open mind, but man, I've seen the MKBHD video, like the part of it that I think he shot for Mr. Boss, and or at least it's adjacent to it, and it's horrible. Like the main gist is actually kind of okay, like glass is glass, glass breaks, right? But then there are some baffling statements that suggest like a super duper non-understanding of actual material science, which, by the way, I am not pretending that I do, right? But at least I'm not trying to give such simplistic answers that they end up being basically wrong, right? Like I can give simplistic answers that are kind of right, but then when it comes to more detail, I'll be like, you know what, for everything else, just ask somebody who's like a real engineer, right? And you can broadly say statements like, well, the harder glass gets, right, the more brittle it gets. So if you're trying to optimize for scratch resistance, you're gonna make it more easy to shatter. But we'll get to all of that when we react to Mr. Boss's video. I apologize for getting a little bit rambly. I already see Plasma Void 67 leaving a message saying could never get into either of those YouTubers. So I assume you mean Mr. Boss and MKBHD. They are literally two of the top 5 biggest tech YouTubers on the planet. And I would argue when it comes to the Apple community, they are the 2 biggest, right? Like they are more important in that regard than Unboxed Therapy or Linus Tech Tips. So we'll have to see the way I might clash with them today. And Steve, one of our Mark Check Pro Max members, saying, well, actually tries watching live for once today. Well, I hope you're actually able to do so. Looking forward to some drama. SMI, but again, I'm not doing drama for the purpose of drama. I am gonna be as honest and as direct as I can be to make sure that I react to it, and obviously any other piece of news, analytically and fairly, and just try to cooperate with you guys. Ducky Boy YT saying the video is about more than just the glass. I know. I've seen Greg's Gadgets posts and some other YouTubers post about it. Actually, the glass part isn't even the one that ticked me off the most. Stuff like somewhat misleading statements about unified memory and shit like that is what got me more on all of this. Plasma Void saying, lol, Gritix Mark and all. Greetings to all of you guys while I have you here, no matter how many you are. Thank you so much for joining, whether you're watching live or watching the video afterwards. So what? Please consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't yet done so. Like the video, that helps with the algorithm, that helps us attract more people, grow our community. Beyond all that, share the video out with anybody who you think might enjoy it. Comment. You guys see I love interacting with a lively comment section. You can make a message extra important to me by making it a super chat in the live chat, but I try to respond to as much as I can usually. So if you cannot afford it, don't beat yourself up about it. Please join our Discord. You'll find the link to that in the description below. And starting in 10 minutes, it's actually a new feature of the channel, something that I've been trying to promise you guys for a while. It's something that I mostly forgot, and I do apologize if there are any technical issues right now with it, which is I opened up a stage channel or a voice channel that happens to be a stage on Discord. So that way you guys can join, you can raise your hand over there, and no bad gestures, I guess, from a guy from Germany trying to do with the left one. If you raise your hand, I can put you on stage. That way we can actually communicate together, have a talk. I highly recommend you guys first leave me actually a comment on YouTube, because I have not been able to make Sidecar on the MacBook work with continuity camera simultaneously. So I wasn't able to put the Discord with everything onto my iPad that's connected to my Mac. So please leave a chat, preferably again a super small super chat, right in the live chat. Let me know that you want to join the stage, and then we can talk about all of this together. And Plasma Void also learning from my previous video, saying audio and video coming through good. That's very nice. You know what? I'm actually gonna give you some small mark action now as we slowly transition into the actual main topics of today, because we do actually have a little bit more than just the quote-unquote MKBHD and Mrwhosetheboss video. And as always, leave suggestions to what else you would like to see me react to. And of course, if you join the Discord, you can communicate with me much more regularly as you can with Twitter. But usually I am on Twitter, but I take it way less seriously than I used to. It's basically just an extra way to find new viewers. It's not something that I try to engage with as eagerly as I did in the past. Riley, our usual number one yapper, saying hello. Hello, Riley. Guys, we are now, I think, ready to go, almost 10 minutes into the stream. Plenty of yapping out of the way. I actually wanted to start with something that has been happening over the last couple of days, which is more and more YouTubers have been getting their hands on dummies for the iPhone Ultra, or what we will know as Apple's first foldable. Whether or not it actually ends up being called iPhone Ultra, iPhone Fold, or anything adjacent to that, we'll have to wait and see. I see that the comments are going well. My stream is flowing smoothly. That's great. So let's get into the story. It's not a huge one, and I assume most of you have seen it. This comes from several YouTubers, but the biggest one is a friend of the channel. It's Vadim Yurev from Max Tech, actually getting their hands on dummies for the iPhone 18 Pro models, and their hands on the iPhone Fold or iPhone Ultra dummies, and then using them to compare that to other Apple products, including other iPhones like this here, the 17 Pro Max, or of course the iPad mini, which actually you see that in terms of overall form factor, Apple does try to create a little bit of a similarity here. Honestly, I kind of almost would have liked if it would have been one-to-one with the iPad mini, maybe with a slimmer bezel, right? But the screen being actually exactly the same would probably also really help out developers and stuff like that. But the main part of this that I actually think is very interesting to most people, because I assume that most people are not gonna run out and buy the iPhone Ultra right away. It's a first generation product. It's going to be expensive, well north of $2,000 once it's configured for most people. And let's actually talk about the iPhone 18 Pro family, because yes, in conjunction with previous rumors, we now see that the iPhone 18 Pro Max is actually going to be a bit thicker than the iPhone 17 Pro Max. Now, when it comes to the exact chassis and stuff like that, stuff can vary a little bit with dummy models. However, this one is specifically targeting different camera plateau thickness levels. So let's look at those numbers. According to Europe, both the camera plateau and camera lenses will protrude further on the iPhone 18 Pro Max compared to the 17 Pro Max. That obviously also connects to rumors about, for example, different optics. The main camera, the wide camera, is rumored to be getting a wider aperture and a variable aperture system, while the telephoto camera is mainly rumored to be getting a wider aperture. Will there be any sensor changes as well? There have been rumors that Apple is targeting a 1 by 1.12 inch sensor, at least for the main camera. Maybe in the years to come, also a 200 megapixel for the telephoto. But it seems like those are going to be features reserved for 2027, 2028, and maybe beyond. So different lens systems that could partially explain the thickness. Obviously, other changes that are rumored for the iPhone 18 Pro Max include a larger and potentially heavier and thicker battery. So that also plays into that. Plasma's Avoid saying, I was actually kind of bummed and skeptical of the iPhone 17 design change, but I have come to adore it. It feels so damn gold in the hands. I assume you mean good, but good and gold are sometimes interchangeable. Very smooth all around, great cooling. So I assume you mean the 17 Pros, and I actually totally agree. I think that Apple learns over time from products that are very different, and I would argue that there is a little bit of inspiration in the iPhone 17 Pro family from the Apple Watch Ultra. You know, that brutalist style, these curves, a little like these curves that tend to protect it, but also simultaneously add more space. That extra lip across the display that makes it more durable if you happen to hit like the ground or something with your watch. And like, I feel like that's could be a little bit of an inspiration for the camera plateau, but obviously then just the functional inspiration for it. Just make it thicker, put more cooling on top of the chip, right? Move some parts around. Like, yeah, I feel it's awesome. And I feel like that these decisions over time have really benefited Apple whenever they don't put form over function, but they also don't necessarily say, oh, we are going to do everything exactly like everyone else. We're just going to make everything either thicker or thinner, depending on which master we are serving today and stuff like that. But let's actually do something crazy like the plateau. And let's actually return to a unibody design while the rest of the industry has followed the iPhone 4 and the glass sandwich design. Interesting as never noticed the Apple Watch parallel. Thank you. I'm not saying this is exactly correct, but this is actually just a thought I had today because I was sitting on the floor in the train because they didn't have seats today. I was too stupid to book one. And I was kind of like playing with the plateau a little bit, just being a little bit bored. And I had my Apple Watch Ultra on, and I'm like, you know what? Those curves kind of feel familiar. Which also really shows that the girl I'm dating is not living very near to me. I'm feeling a little bit lonely. Let's get back to the real stuff. I'm sorry. Also, while we get started, we should also be hitting the Discord time where the stage event should start, which I actually themed it exactly after this stream. I'll have to see how it works. Again, if the calls don't work out today, please bear with me. This is my first time and stuff like that. So 17 Pro Max thickness from the cameras, 12.92 millimeters, 18 Pro Max thickness, 13.77. You can see that the plateau is also thicker from 11.23 to 11.54, but actually the camera increase is more substantial. So we have 0.3 millimeters here. We have about 0.75 actually here. No, 0.85 being added here. So the more substantial part actually comes from the increase in camera lens thickness. But yeah, when it comes to the actual body, I'm not even sure what they say here. Apple officially lists the depth as 8.755. That's, of course, for the main body. That does not include the camera plateau. The same thing applies, obviously, to the iPhone Air, right, where they advertise 5.6 millimeters. But then you get to its plateau and it gets much thicker over there. The increased thickness is expected to be due to the upgraded camera system. But then again, also don't forget, the more Apple puts up here, the more space they create down there for larger batteries, larger speakers, about basically everything else, right? I mean, even the logic board, right? It doesn't technically end under the plateau. It actually protrudes a little bit down there. And of course, Apple has implemented their first vapor chamber on the iPhone 17 Pros. But then you look at even some cheaper Android devices, and while Apple's vapor chamber is about like this, you'll have like cheaper devices where the vapor chamber is like twice the size. So Apple has some room to grow that vapor chamber. And part of that will be increasing the thickness, again, moving some parts around. And while there are some denser components, for example, like silicon carbon batteries, up until Apple chooses to implement such a technology, they will have to maybe find some way here to add extra thickness. And then, of course, when you look at the iPad mini comparison, you'll see that the iPhone Ultra, when unfolded, is still smaller than the current iPad mini, and that's even irregardless of its relatively thick bezels, which I really don't like. There's a new Oppo tablet that I think is really good in that regard. Yeah, Plasma Void is saying 18 going to be robust, could have even been better battery and cooling. Well, there is a larger battery rumored by about like 200 milliampere hours. When it comes to cooling, not much is rumored. To be honest, this year, I wouldn't bet on Apple increasing the size of the vapor chamber. And the reason for that is that Apple is actually going to have major efficiency improving technologies, which is they're going to be switching from N3P to 2 nanometer. Even their RAM packaging is actually going to be more efficient by using TSMC's WMCM 2.5D packaging that is going to bring the RAM literally physically closer to the chip, improve latency, reduce power consumption for communication. Now, they could use that to also give us much more memory bandwidth and very highly clocked memory. That would obviously increase power consumption for the package, but we aren't sure yet. There have been some rumors that Apple would switch from a roughly 64-bit system, not roughly, a 64-bit memory bus currently on iPhones, to a 96-bit system on the A Pro chips. We'll have to see how that plays out. They can obviously also use 10,700 megatransfers per second memory rather than the current 9600 one. So all of that would increase package power. But again, I can only regurgitate some rumors and stuff like that for you guys. So iPhone Ultra metal dummy versus iPad mini. Now I should note that one thing that has been omitted thus far is the fact that, well, it seems to be omitted in the dummies. I'm not saying that it's actually going to be omitted in the final product, but no iPhone Ultra dummy thus far shows support for MagSafe. So there is a chance that the iPhone Ultra, despite being the most expensive iPhone, is not, well, it already isn't going to be the most feature-rich iPhone, right? It's not going to, for example, have the telephoto camera of the iPhone Pros, but it could also be missing MagSafe. Now, whether or not that's just a limitation of the dummies, because when you look at these dummies, for example, they do not have like the alignment magnet and stuff like that, right? There's a difference here and here. So I'm not saying these dummies are going to be perfect, but there is a chance that the iPhone Ultra ends up being without MagSafe. I'm not sure what exactly the thought behind it is. There is some speculation right now that when unfolded, the thickness of the iPhone Ultra is going to be 4.77 millimeters. So actually thinner than the roughly 5 millimeters that was rumored for quite a while. And that would make it under 1 centimeters thick when folded up in the 9.4 millimeter range, 9.5. So actually a product that very nicely replaces, when you look at it, the iPad mini in most ways, because while that screen might be smaller, it's still a roughly 4:3 aspect ratio here, so it's going to be nice for stuff like watching videos. It's also going to, of course, have features that the current iPad mini display doesn't have. OLED, which there's a rumor that the next iPad mini is going to get OLED, but 120 hertz, ProMotion, super high peak brightness levels. That's not stuff that's being rumored for the next OLED iPad mini. That one is probably going to use a cheaper LTPS panel, at least for a generation or two, going to be limited at 60 hertz, probably going to be limited around 600 nits of brightness. This is probably going to be like 1,000 nits sustained. This is going to have full ProMotion range from 1 to 120 hertz. So there's a lot going on in the iPhone Ultra. Again, I agree. Plasma Void, you're saying it looks intriguing. We'll have to see how it all plays out. iPhone Ultra open display versus 17 Pro Max. I guess open means unfolded. Basically the same display width, but 56.9% taller display when comparing this view. This is also why I tell people, please don't use diagonal inches to compare this, because here we are looking at what, like a 6.9-inch screen, while this is going to be labeled as like 7.6 inches, but it's going to be close to 60% larger. Even if it is 50% larger, that's obviously not 1/10 larger like the diagonal would suggest, right? So yeah, it's really, really much better in that regard. And Vadim from MaxTech rightly points out that, yeah, this is going to make 16:9 videos much better, which are going to be probably like 2 times larger effectively, because here for 16:9 you have to do it like this, right? Obviously, you have to cut into the 19.5:9 aspect ratio screen, while if you do it here, you have the full width available. Yes, you'll have dark borders on the top and bottom. I always forget which one is letterbox and stuff like that. But yeah, for 16:9 content, this is absolutely going to be king. And for 4:3 content, like let's say you are in Star Trek original series fan like I am, this is absolutely going to destroy it, offering you well over like probably like 2.5 times more screen real estate, unless you end up zooming into a 4:3 content on a 19.5:9 aspect ratio screen. We have Rosa joining the chat saying hello. We have Benveni saying yo to all of you guys. Thank you so much for actually showing up. I know the YouTube algorithm has not been really kind to my recent videos because I went on a 1-month hiatus. Thankfully, Apple announced the Tim Cook to John Turner's transition. That definitely helped. The last video got up to like 2,000 views, but usually a topic like that should be like in the 4,000 or 5,000 view range. But yeah, thank you so much for keeping this channel relevant, even while the moron that I am actually kind of neglects it sometimes. But again, I've had a lot of stuff happening in my life, a lot of good stuff. So yeah. Thank you so much. Mini mode looks very cozy to use and possible to use one-handed. Well, yeah, obviously, when you look now at it folded up, right now you would have to switch it around. You don't want to look at the back cameras. Yeah, it should be a 3:2 aspect ratio screen in the front, which is actually going to be really interesting because this actually brings us back to the original iPhone up until the iPhone 4. If you remember, those screens were 480 by 320. And then eventually the Retina display on the iPhone 4 and 4S were 960 by 640. Those were 3:2 aspect ratio screens. And it's kind of cool to have those back in a way. We'll have to see how Apple optimizes DOS and liquid glass around it. Plasma Void, you're also rightfully pointing out that iOS 26 uh, will be optimized for it. So there are a lot of rumors that iOS 27, iPadOS 27, all these releases will be much smaller. Basically, their main features are going to be refinements, bug fixes, performance improvements, battery life enhancements, and then there's going to be some AI and stuff like that. But don't forget, yeah, Apple is basically launching a new product category in a way. And while it mostly is going to be derivative of iPhone user interface elements and iPad user interface elements, it should be a pretty big deal. For example, when you look here at the 18 Pro Max, one thing that you will see is, what does it not have? It doesn't have a landscape mode for its super wide screen, right? Because you're very unlikely to hold your phone like that. You're much more likely to hold it in portrait mode. This will mean a return of landscape to the iPhone, which we haven't had since like 16 by 9 screens. Yeah, so I'm absolutely intrigued. Will I buy the first generation? It depends. I'm very torn because I think that the colors that have been leaked for the iPhone 18 Pro are absolutely gorgeous. And if the real world battery life ends up being superior on the 18 Pro Max, that might still point me towards getting an 18 Pro Max, but I'm really not sure. And I guess maybe we'll leave it up to a vote at some point on this channel or something like that. Let me look at the Discord, Mark text stage. Oh yeah, there's the event. As I said, guys, if you are interested in joining the stage, enjoying the call, join an overall call, right? You can let me know first on YouTube, because that's just easier for me, I think, to make sure that I know, oh, you're coming from YouTube, you want to join the Discord stage call, and then we can plan it all out together. Benvini saying, any guess on the battery life? It should actually be pretty good, because it's rumored to be getting a 5400 to 5800 milliampere hour battery, which will be the largest battery on the iPhone. I'm also very much inclined to believe that, given the size, the thickness that we're looking at here, this means that this product does use some kind of silicon carbon battery, or at least some other density improving technology, like maybe stacked batteries or stuff like that. So we'll have to see how that plays out. But my guess, it's probably for the unfolded stuff, is probably going to be basically 17 Pro Max level, because it will have, yes, a larger screen than the 17 Pro Max, but don't forget it's going to have an N2 modem, so Apple's second generation Wi-Fi modem. It's also going to be the first Pro or Ultra level iPhone with Apple's own 5G modem. Currently, the 17 Pro and 17 Pro Max still use a Qualcomm modem, and not the most efficient one at that. So yeah, 2-nanometer chip, likely a super efficient LTPO plus panel, pretty large battery, definitely larger than anything that Samsung has thus far put into the Galaxy Z Fold series. Um, yeah, it's honestly, I'm a little bit surprised beyond the thickness that Apple wouldn't do like a tri-camera setup, but I guess Apple maybe wants you to push to still own both a Pro iPhone and an Ultra iPhone. But who knows? Because they could easily cut off like 10% of the battery, give it 5,000 milliampere hours, which would still be enough, which would still be more than Samsung has ever put into the Z Fold. But then again, the telephoto that they could do in here would be much inferior to this. So yeah, it's a little bit of a, and I'm not doing the 6-7 thing. It is a hard decision. I understand why Apple is more leaning on the no side here. If you want to support Mark, hit the like, but also click the share. Oh, Plasma Void doing the YouTube call out stuff. Thank you so much. That way I have to do it less. Yeah, but that's about it. I think the Ultra is a really cool product. I'm starting to get more interested in it the closer we get to it. Let's actually look, though, at what else Apple is going to be launching in the not too distant future and under new leadership. Let's look at Mark Gurman's latest Power On newsletter, just released a couple of hours ago on Bloomberg, of course. It goes into the transition between from Tim Cook, who has now been, of course, Apple's CEO for 15 years, to the senior vice president of hardware engineering, John Turnus, and what products Tim Cook is kind of leaving for John to announce. According to Mark Gurman, Apple CEO Tim Cook is leaving successor John Turnus with a strong pipeline of products that include the foldable iPhone in September. That's something we obviously have talked about. Ben Vinny, you're saying you can't wait for WWDC, as do I, and that has partially to do with the transition. I just want to see aesthetically how they handle it, because I do assume that Tim is still going to be not like the main presenter in the sense that he is going to be spending the most time on stage. That's still going to be Craig, because it's a software event. There are some questions about whether or not we're going to see any hardware anytime soon, or if all of it maybe is delayed to sometime after John Turnus becomes Apple CEO in September. We'll have to see about that. But yeah, I'm super excited for WWDC. Just Apple being on stage and promising bug fixes and promising battery life improvements, I think that's actually going to go a long way. Like I myself, I don't really experience any major bugs or anything. I have like one visual glitch on my iPhone that I know is there and doesn't really bother me. I wish it wasn't there, of course. But yeah, like obviously there's a big consensus on the niche tech Twitter, so it's not a broad consensus for the entire community, but like for the super hardcore, there's a little bit of the idea, oh, Apple software quality has really come down and stuff like that. Never under Steve. Steve would be rolling in his grave. You guys know all that bullshit that people tend to say around that. Right. So, yeah, I'm really excited for Apple to be countering that, but also obviously for anything new that's going to come at WWDC. We're actually now at the end of April, and iOS 26.5 is already in beta testing, and we haven't heard anything about the new Siri. So there is a good chance that Apple has delayed all new Siri features also up until iOS 27, which will leave to John Turnus not only all that hardware stuff we're going to talk about, but also all the software stuff, like, for example, revamped Siri with a new interface, a separate app, and stuff like that. Anyone involved in the MacBook Pro redesign of 2021 is my hero. I agree. I think that I have liked John Turnus's work ever since I knew that he was responsible for the iMac Pro. Not because I thought that the iMac Pro was a perfect product by any means, but because I thought that the iMac Pro was needed, right? And I like it when Apple is able to acknowledge, look, maybe right away we cannot do exactly what we want, because very clearly they were looking at the Apple Silicon transition that was still a few years away. But they were like, look, but we have to have a powerful Mac. And if we are not going to update the trash can Mac Pro, and seemingly a new cheese grater Mac Pro is taking some time, what can we do in the meantime? And it's that kind of pragmatism. While it doesn't seem very magical or very whimsy or very Apple-y, sometimes you have to be pragmatic and just deliver. And I think that there have also been some reports that John Turnus is supposedly much more decisive internally as a leader than Tim is, and people are looking forward internally at Apple to have a leader, whether he is right or wrong, because obviously he's going to make mistakes too, but sometimes he'll just be able to say, nope, this product internally is bad, we're moving away from that, moving on to something else, or yes, this is actually great, double down, triple down on the resources and all of that, combine the teams, make it less secret now, get it back to work, right? Some people are saying that that's what Apple Vision Pro needs to finally find its footing and and of course Apple Glass, which is going to follow up Apple Vision Pro. But I'm rambling again. Benveni, I'm just waiting for better battery life, not looking forward to any AI. Well, you can disable all of that AI. I'll believe it when they actually release. I assume you mean the more refined software. Plasma Void, hype for iOS 27 and don't even use Siri at all. Well, I mean, if you just like a very refined Apple software product, I assume you're going to be happy with it. But it's still funny because, yeah, it means the main feature doesn't mean anything to you. Any refinements are fun for me. I think we'll get some useful daily life features too, instead of tech fancy features. Well, the fancy tech features by iPhone standards are going to come to the iPhone Ultra, right? A lot of people have asked for stuff like multitasking over the years, and it's finally happening on an iPhone, but it's happening on an iPhone with a completely new form factor, right? So Apple is a little bit sneaky in that regard. Okay. Apple Inc.'s new Chief Executive Officer, John Ternus, officially begins his tenure on September 1st. Sorry, I almost read September 11th. Oh, I should stop watching so much red letter media. They make so many 9/11 jokes. Jesus Christ. He begins his tenure on September 1st. Less than 2 weeks later, he will introduce what promises to be the biggest new Apple product in a decade, the first foldable iPhone. That timing is not coincidental, I'm told. As part of Apple's planning for the transition from Cook to Ternus, the company, they basically want to say, Tim, you cooked enough. Now let John make a new turn for us. Somewhere like I don't know. People shot themselves hearing me make those dad jokes. I'm so sorry. And Angelica, one of our MarkTech Pro Max members during the test, that actually reminds me. She says she's happy that I'm analyzing this topic. Well, I haven't yet started the main thumbnail reaction, but I am reacting to a lot of stuff just off the cuff, I guess. Actually didn't read the Power newsletter before. I just skimmed it. Guys, I gave you all the shoutouts to all the YouTube jazz, subscribing, liking, sharing, commenting. Also, if you want to support this channel directly beyond sending donations in the form of a super chat or super sticker, please consider becoming a channel member. Shout out to all our MarkTech Pro Max members, that Angelica, Jonathan, Max, and Steve. And shout out to all our MarkTech Pro members, which are KSB Wonders and Denise. I think I haven't forgotten anyone. If I have, let me know in the live chat. That's why you guys should be watching live, to correct me on shit like that, to make sure I never forget you, because that's something I definitely don't want to do. Hopefully the new Siri will be released by the time I get the 16 gigabyte iPhone. Look, I have been so sure, I was willing to bet on it, that the second generation iPhone foldable, right, the iPhone Ultra 2 next year, would get 16 gigs of RAM, because I'm basically sure of a couple of things. First, Apple is transitioning to some form of 96 bits on the RAM, whether that is going to be related to the A20 Pro chip and using LPDDR5X still, or if it's going to come by using LPDDR6. It is something that Apple can now afford to do by using WMCM, much more efficient packaging, bringing all that memory close, reducing latency. And I would have bet that all of that stuff, including the extra multitasking that you're going to do on an iPhone Ultra, including the fact that we also expect that at some point Apple is also going to make an even larger iPhone Ultra, right, running more pixels, potentially more apps side by side, that is going to push Apple to make 16 gigabyte iPhones. But then again, Apple is also even stingy with 16 gigabyte iPad Pros. You have to get higher storage configurations. But all of that was before the complete catastrophe that is the current RAM and storage market. So I'm not even sure if Apple will have the supply for it. But I do hope, like, that at least in the next 2 or 3 years, Apple is going to give us 16 gigabyte iPhones as well. But yeah, I fully understand it. Benvini saying not changing iPhone until 16 gigabyte RAM gets released. I do understand that. Benvini, I think you had the 16 Pro Max, right? That's a great product. And if you have the 17 Pro, then that's even better. Like, I fully understand waiting for a specific hardware feature that you think is gonna like future proof your product. Plasma Void saying nice pun, nice pun train. Yeah, gonna run a pun train on you guys. Okay, to a little bit of seriousness. Um, as part of Apple's planning for the transition from Cook to Turnus, the company wanted its new leader to be the one hosting the event to unveil the device, setting up to become the face of what it believes will be a blockbuster new product category. This is also funny because Apple apparently plans to make only 3 million of the original iPhone Ultra. Well, I assume that applies to the first batch because 3 million is definitely not going to be enough for this. The foldable iPhone will be a complex, innovative, and expensive piece of tech that is sure to excite Apple's biggest fans. Well, as I can guess from the chat, I think Gurman is correct here. And Turnus oversaw the engineering and product development of the device. So we already get some inside scoop here, making him the perfect person to be the face of the new era of the iPhone. In creating the foldable, Apple focused on 4 selling points. Durability, that's obviously versus other foldables, not necessarily versus the iPhone 18 Pro or even the iPhone Air or something like that. Performance, that's going to be powered by the A20 Pro chip, 12 gigs of RAM, WMCM packaging, Apple's C2 modem, Apple's N2 Wi-Fi modem. So a lot of more custom parts than Apple would have even been able to do a couple of years back. A less visible display crease, that's a big part of it. And the horizontal screen when unfolded, it looks like an iPad. That's what we reacted to when we looked at the tweets from Vadim Yurov. This all plays into Turnus' strengths. He spent much of his tenure working on the iPad and improving performance, reliability, and battery life across the entire product portfolio. Basically, he was very much Apple's pro guy. Whenever a product needed more performance, it could finally get a little bit thicker because it wasn't like held back by some old Johnny Ive idea about how thin or light something had to be. That was what John Turnus was responsible for. The excitement around the launch will give the new CEO a tailwind in both buzz and revenue, which obviously is something that the new board is gonna like, while letting him tout a product that reflects his style. The idea that Turnus drove this whole process will be put front and center during the launch period, I'm told. I assume this is going to happen mostly through stuff like interviews and things like that. I assume also that people like Greg Joswiak, Deidre O'Brien, people who I myself have predicted are going to leave Apple in the next year or two because, well, they are frankly retirement age and they have been with Apple longer than John Turnus, for example. They rival the likes of Tim Cook for how long they've been, and some even haven't been there for longer than Tim. But I assume that these people, faces that are very much liked and known by like the press and stuff like that, they're gonna stay during the transition and help push Turnus over that finish line, cement him as the CEO, give him the kudos he deserves for stuff like overseeing that iPhone Ultra development process. And then they will leave, and then he'll be able to shape the company much more by hiring younger people and people who might follow his beliefs a little bit more in line, but we'll have to see how that plays out. At first, the foldable iPhone will likely be hard to find in stores due to supply chain complexity. I remember an old rumor, for example, that while Apple has been pushing for more independence from Chinese production, it's not possible for the iPhone Ultra to be basically made anywhere else right now. So while you can make something like an iPhone 18 or 18 Pro even potentially in Vietnam, the iPhone Ultra is such complex production processes. The equipment and the expertise for that right now exists only inside China. So yeah, it's a supply chain complexity, even to a degree, a little bit of a political complexity. God knows what might happen in like the trade wars between the US and China at some point. But all that complexity, a constraint that should only, is according to Gurman, a constraint that should only heighten demand. Though the expected price of $2,000 or more will be daunting to many shoppers, it's certain to boost Apple's average selling price, which is already close to $1,000, by the way, and help fuel revenue growth. And it could entice Android customers who have been using foldables for more than half a decade. A small rant on the side. And no, this is not. I was accused of humble bragging because I keep bringing up a girl I know. It's all I'm going to say. But I'm using her as a good measuring stick for non-techie people who just appreciate tech when they see it and when they touch it. And I was showing her all the new phones and all the new laptops, right? And I showed her like the Z Flip 7 or whatever number, and the Z Fold 7, right? And she was like, oh, that's interesting, but why is this crease so ugly? And I'm like, well, that's about as good as it gets right now, except for maybe some Chinese devices that are not in the store. And this is like the seventh generation, so they have refined it. It was much worse in the past. And she was like, wait, foldables have been out for like 7 generations? I thought they were out like for a year or two, right? And I'm like, no. Like maybe, and she actually heard from it in the press and stuff like that, I believe, mostly because people started talking more about foldables when rumors about an iPhone foldable started coming up. And they were basically saying, oh, Apple might be making a foldable. And then people were like, wait, what is a foldable? And people were like, well, have you looked at all those Samsung devices? Have you looked at some of these Oppos and Xiaomis and whatever, right? And yeah, this is just interesting to me to hear how non-techie people perceive all of that stuff. The September 1st handoff also means for Turnus's first full quarter SEO will be the holiday period. The company is likely to surpass its prior December quarter record, with analysts forecasting a haul of nearly $150 billion. Jesus, that's some Dr. Evil level money. That will help Turnus start on a winning note. Back when Cook took over from Steve Jobs in 2011, he also benefited from a strong product pipeline. The then novel Siri voice assistant arrived just 2 months into his tenure, and there was a surge of new devices in 2012, his first full year at the helm, including iPhone 5, which was obviously a redesign from the iPhone 4 and 4S, Apple's first larger screen on iPhones, iPad mini, which something supposedly Steve Jobs was against until the very end, and then he changed his mind basically shortly before death. Thinner iMacs, that's actually the first iMac that I ever got, the late 2012 iMac, the first redesigned version with the laminated super slim screen up front, new iPods, as well as the first iPad and MacBook Pro with Retina displays. But Turnus is poised for an even bigger flood of products, including the foldable iPhone, which we now have talked quite a lot about. Apple will enter roughly 10 new product categories within the next few years. This is not correct. The correct thing here would be Apple is currently exploring to enter roughly 10 new product categories within the next few years. Just because something is cooking in the pipeline does not mean it's actually going to make it over the finish line. Some of these products individually might be so like popular internally at Apple that Apple is just going to prioritize them over the rest. We'll have to see. That means Turnus could quickly eclipse his predecessor by this measure. Cook's tenure saw the debut of just 3 major categories: the Apple Watch in 2015, AirPods in 2016, and the Vision Pro in 2024. We'll get to how this is not a super fair comparison, but okay. I mean, by that logic, though, given some of the products that are being mentioned here, right? The HomePod is a product category that he is not mentioning here, right? But then he is mentioning the Home Hub here. He is not mentioning AirTags here, but he's mentioning stuff like security devices, which are also, like, maybe they're more complex than AirTags, but still. So this is not fair at all, basically. but whatever. Um, Also, I would almost count the Apple Silicon transition kind of almost like a new product category, but we'll have to see. The main gist here is actually not wrong, right? Which is that John Turnus and Plasma, what you're saying, let's go, John and his team. We are rooting for him, definitely. But he has quite a lot on his plate for this time, right? For so early in his tenure, right? Is it 3 times more than Tim launched in 15 years? Absolutely not. But yeah, it's Mark Gurman does these little somewhat clever things, which I then have to come in and do some mark on mark violence. It's just the C and the K that differentiate us, Gurman. Come on, we can be so much closer. Ugh. You can even replace the U in your name and you can make yourself German. And then we can be even closer. During a recent town hall, Turnus told employees Apple is about to change the world and described the company's pipeline as the most exciting of his career. Even though none of the upcoming products will be as groundbreaking as the original 2007 iPhone, what honestly is, the pace and volume of what's coming are remarkable. And let's go through these products individually. The Smart Home Hub, essentially a home pod with a screen. I still hope Apple keeps making large home pods because I do want a stereo pair of HomePod 3s with Apple's N1 or N2 Wi-Fi modem, just flanking my TV for the best possible stereo quality. But obviously, in the AI era, right? This is now rumored to be a HomePod with a screen. The device can be pinned on a half-dome speaker base or on the wall using a magnetic system. It has an operating system that's centered around Siri. It will be able to control your home and have features like FaceTime. So it's obviously much more feature-rich than a HomePod. But then again, I do find it, as I mentioned before, a little bit weird to not mention the HomePod for Cook's tenure, but then mention a HomePod on steroids for John Turnus as a new product. A facial recognition system, meanwhile, will let it personalize the experience. Obviously, Apple has some kind of biometric system for all its devices. I mean, even the Apple Watch uses the fact that it's linked to your iPhone and that it's connected to your skin. While it doesn't have a biometric sensor by itself, your iPhone that's connected does. And obviously the Apple Watch, while it's on you and it can sense that, unless your entire arm gets chopped off, you're basically secure in using it. Binvini saying, hopefully as time goes on, people stop comparing everything to Steve Jobs. Yeah, I do references to Steve Jobs, right? His philosophies, his quotes, his products that I think still define big parts of the tech world, right? The things he liked or disliked, right? Like, for example, the fact that he didn't want an iPad mini up until he kind of relented by the very end. But I never used that to say Steve was right, and everyone after him is wrong, or even for the vice versa. I'm never saying, oh, Steve was wrong on that. Time changes, technology changes, user preferences change. You can be right about you can be right about the statement at one time, and then in 5 or 10 years, it would be wrong to say the exact same thing because the market and the technology under you have shifted. Let that man rest in peace and not use him to badmouth someone. Exactly. And I mentioned even the usual subjects who will be like, oh, Steve is turning over in his grave, right? Ugh, I hate that. Plasma White, comparisons are fair and expected. It's possible to love the current era and also let natural comparisons happen. Yeah, natural comparisons. There will be some products that just completely overlap, right? But those comparisons shouldn't happen in the way that but this is way better or this is way worse. Because at this point, they're so different because they're going to be soon separated by 2 decades that these comparisons become meaningless in that regard. You can just make them almost like factual statements. Oh, Steve like that, or Steve didn't like that, right? Without making like a value statement on what Apple should be doing nowadays. We'll compare to Tim as well now that we can see his entire tenure. Yeah, but don't forget, big parts of Tim's tenure are also defined by John Turnus as the senior vice president of hardware engineering, right? So some decisions that we might not have liked or might have liked very much under Tim could have also been ascribed partially or even to a big part to John Turnus. So it's sometimes very hard to make these statements. Next AI product, tabletop robot. This device is a larger version of the smart home hub, a roughly 9-inch screen versus 7-inch square panel, and differs because it attaches to a robotic limb that can move the screen around. That should allow for better video conferencing, among other things. I promise you that this product is a complete prototype right now. If it's just going to be a swiveling arm of tech that's not even a very good speaker, or a screen that's not really detachable and usable like an iPad, Apple is not going to launch that. This tabletop robot, and Apple even published a white paper about how they think like robots in the home should behave in order to mimic more human behavior, right? This is not stuff that Apple plans to launch in 5 minutes or anything like that, right? This is stuff that Apple is exploring, partially to the robotic nature of it, partially to the AI nature that needs to power it, and partially because of the tabletop, like kind of like home hub expansion element. If this ends up being a product that way too much overlaps with the home hub, with an iPad, and it basically becomes just a swiveling robot arm without much selling points behind it, I promise you that Apple is not gonna launch it. Like, just because it's better for video, like, guys, we already have features for better video conferencing. For one, on the very simple level, we can just swivel our own devices slightly around, but then we have features like center stage, ultra wide cameras that dynamically zoom into the portion of the video where you are, and maybe someone comes in from the side, and then it expands the view. You don't really need the swiveling robot arm, but whatever. Benveni, I'm going to miss the way Tim says good morning. True, that's also something I'm looking forward to at WWDC. As I said, he isn't going to be the main presenter in terms of how much speaking time he has, but he's going to be the guy who says good morning, right? And good morning, Cupertino, correct? And then he's gonna basically sign off. And I'm pretty sure that he might actually end the presentation by saying, I'm still Apple CEO for like 2 months at that point, but this is my last major event live. So thank you guys so much, right? This is going to be a bit emotional. I'm looking forward to that. There's also going to be Apple security devices. Apple wants to compete with Ring and Google Nest with a privacy-focused home security system. This product, the sensor with a camera, is central to that strategy. Again, I find it baffling to include a security device as a brand new product category, but then for Tim Cook, you are not going to mention AirTag. Okay, that definitely seems unfair. AI-powered camera wearables, and this is actually where I will be fighting tooth and nail with Mark Gurman, because I think that these products are also very much competing internally with each other. One of them is also very questionable if Mark Gurman is even correct in his reporting on it. But I'm not sure if Apple plans to launch all 3 of those. Let's start with the one that's actually most likely to happen, in my opinion, the smart glasses. Apple is developing glasses that will use cameras to capture media and collect data for AI users. Again, this is such a... Mark Gurman always does this, and I do not try to be hypercritical of it, but it is becoming a little bit annoying. He always tries to make every new product, every new software feature, everything about AI. I assume he's a little bit jealous of the reporters who get to focus on the likes of Amazon, Microsoft, Facebook, Google, because everything about these companies is about AI these days. For Apple, he kind of has to shoehorn it in. Even like the mention of the competition of the Meta Ray-Bans from Facebook will also have basic features like the ability to play music, trigger Siri, and take phone calls. So they're gonna compete here with Facebook. But again, he's saying collect data for AI uses. This is such a stupid statement. Like collect data, you mean, oh, they have a camera, so you're gonna be using features like visual intelligence, and maybe some of the data becomes flagged, like in a positive sense flagged in Apple servers and uses them to teach their own AI. Like Apple thus far has been very, very careful in how they collect AI. So making this statement out of the blue, which I think is actually just basically him using poor wording, is already bad. But then also he just like, these are going to be the main features: music, actually interacting with Siri, phone calls, using maps while you're walking for directions, right? But obviously he has to name AI first. But okay, right? Now again, partially is that this first generation might come without a display, so some features might be limited, but we'll have to wait and see if Apple even releases those screenless glasses, because they are now Meta Ray-Bans with a screen. It would be weird for Apple to only launch the version without the screen. So I'm not sure. Like, Gurman tries to double down on some things that I think are very much internally at Apple, not fully figured out. And I'm not sure if his insight is actually enough to make these kinds of predictive statements. Benjamin asking, Mark, have you watched the CNET video about John? No. But I know that also 9to5Mac made like a summary on him. I'll do that. I'll do my own research, and then hopefully by like Tuesday or Wednesday I'll have enough and to know what I should react to. But I did not prepare it for today, and unlike some other topics where I'm actually happy to go in unprepared and give you guys a more intense live reaction, in this case, I do want to be a little bit more read up. Glasses could also use AirPods integration. I personally can't envision the product's use cases yet. Without a screen, I struggle to do the same, because those Meta Ray-Bans, that's just camera. You basically use that to capture Snapchats and Instagram content, right? I don't really think that that's something how Apple wants to market themselves, especially given the creepiness factor of smart glasses, right? You're standing next to somebody at the urinal and whatever, right? It can get creepy very fast. And similar to how AirTags weren't the first GPS trackers out there, not even close actually. They were the first ones to be thoroughly scrutinized for it, because with Apple's brand recognition and with Apple's market reach, people were now, well, there are going to be now way more GPS trackers, so we'll now have to think about privacy, but apparently never before that. And the same thing is going to happen with smart glasses. Just because people were not so paranoid about Meta Ray-Bans before, well, once Apple brings out their smart glasses, I promise you, people are going to get much more paranoid about the privacy and security concerns behind that. Next, then, let us get to the product that I think is least likely to come out, but it's not that far away from the other product here. AI AirPods. These high-end AirPods will rely on low-resolution cameras to capture images that can be fed into AI, providing context about the user's surrounding. They could use that information to offer visual-based reminders and improve direction. So these features are completely worthless, in my opinion. If the cameras are so low resolution that you will struggle to actually capture stuff like the ingredients that you have, like on like a grocery related buying, right? So that you can scan the calories, that you can translate what you're seeing, maybe on the menu while you're in another country. If these cameras are too low resolution to actually do that stuff, then they're pretty worthless for most AI things. Mark Gurman's reporting on these AI AirPods also contradicts basically everyone else in the Apple leaker sphere, like Min-Chi Kuo, for example. Multiple other leakers have said that Apple is working on AirPods with infrared cameras, and those infrared cameras could be used for something like air gestures rather than having like that pressable kind of button or surface on them. Them being used for AI, like again, having these constantly on cameras on devices with super small batteries, it just would be such a big issue. And then again, also burdening all those AirPods with all the privacy questions that I've mentioned for the smart glasses already, making it now creepy potentially to wear AirPods because people are going to be like, wait, are those the AirPods with cameras? Are you filming me right now? Ugh, I'm not sure. Infrared, yeah. Air gestures, yeah. AI with low resolution, constantly active cameras for visual based reminders and improved directions? I tend to say no. The other AI variable is a pendant. Apple is working on a small circular device with a computer vision camera system that can capture data and feed it into an iPhone's AI and Siri features. The pendant could be worn as a necklace or as a spin-on clothes. This obviously brings us to numerous products of that kind, like Humane's AI pin, which obviously has been laughed out of the room. um, Again, I struggle to see this product actually taking off, partially again for the same privacy implications, but also partially again because Apple already has the iPhone and Apple already has the Apple Watch. While a camera on the Apple Watch would be even creepier than a pendant here, I'm not sure how people will react to something like that. And ultimately, even the people who aren't against this will be like, well, why should I make like a permanent fashion statement, right? If I can just take out my iPhone, use a much better camera, including an ultra wide and a selfie and a telephoto camera, and just use visual intelligence. And again, this would also highly depend on how much it costs. And then this device would be much more scrutinized for the quality of the AI, something that I don't think Apple is going to overtake the likes of OpenAI very soon. And OpenAI is working on probably a pendant or some kind of other AI product to be worn with Johnny Ive. We'll have to see how that plays out, but I'm not very sure about this one. Ben saying, I was thinking of getting AirPods Pro 3, but I then saw a rumor that it could release a Pro 4 in September. Well, it's not going to be a Pro 4. It's more going to be like a Pro Plus. But basically, the product that is being rumored to launch are these. But for me, what's most likely is that the product is going to be AirPods Pro 3 with infrared cameras for air gestures, which are probably also going to have much more control than just the pressing element, right? And I assume there is going to be a chip swap from the H2 to finally the H3, but then the actual hardware design, the battery size, everything else should be pretty much identical to the AirPods Pro 3. And I would predict that these AirPods would be like $50 to $80 more expensive or something like that. Plasma Void, well, we do have Apple Vision Pro, still leaving room for a non-pro consumer vision wearable. Oh yeah, I'm not saying Apple is going to let privacy and stuff like that stop them from launching a killer new product. And smart glasses can absolutely be a killer new product. I just don't think that a pendant is ever going to be a killer new product. Like when you're just looking at the product that you interact with all day that has all the AI you need, you have AirPods in your ears for quick visual controls, and you have your iPhone when you need to take it out and do some visual intelligence stuff. And once you have glasses, it can kill both AirPods and pendants depending on how sound is integrated on them. But more likely those smart glasses just work together with AirPods. And I feel like it just would be too much for Apple to say, you're wearing our glasses, you're putting our wearables into your ear, you have your Apple Watch on your wrist, and now also put something on your collar that also does some of these same things again. It's the same thinking, kind of how there is no Apple Smart Band or Apple Smart Ring, and in fact, there are no rumors. Many people have said, well, maybe not everyone needs like a smart screen on their health trackers, right? So why shouldn't Apple make like an Apple Watch with a super small screen or no screen, right? Or even a ring. And Apple is like, well, but we like the watch and it sells pretty well. Why should we distract our engineers with something that does essentially the same but worse? And that's kind of how I feel about this. And just being very confused is how I feel about these. While this product to me just seems like a very natural continuation of what Apple Vision Pro started, just bringing it to a smaller form factor, making it more reliant on the iPhone, obviously, as a compromise, but also being much cheaper than Apple Vision Pro. So while I am getting very ranty again, I think everything I'm saying is still quite relevant. Thank you guys for trying to direct my thoughts as much as you can. Ben saying, so should I buy the Pro or this new AirPod? To be quite honest, if you can get a killer deal on AirPods Pro 3, I've been super happy with mine. If you can get them closer to $200, I would just get the AirPods Pro 3. Any guess for AirPods Pro 4 will be released? Well, thus far, Apple's track record is like what? A 3-year gap between AirPods Pro generations. So that would leave us with 2028, right? Because we just got AirPods Pro 3 in 2025. We'll have to see, though. Obviously, I don't try to make buying recommendations based on my own predictions, because that's kind of shitty. We are getting new AirPods in the next half year to a year. That's definitely true. How much better they're going to be and potentially how much more expensive they're going to be than AirPods Pro 3, that is something that I can only speculate about. And that is pretty much what matters, right? Other products. Thankfully, we are now moving beyond the AI predictions. Touchscreen Macs, obviously a high-end MacBook Pro, end of 2026 or early 2027. But we've also heard rumors about other Macs over time potentially getting touchscreens if the new MacBook Pro is well received. If successful, expect Turnus to bring the concept to more computers in the future. Augmented reality glasses. Again, this is Apple glasses, but with a screen. So what Gurman is talking about here is very much not a direct successor in a way to Apple Vision Pro. Yeah, and then a foldable iPad. Apple has been working on a roughly 20-inch foldable iPad. This one apparently has been postponed mostly to focus on the foldable iPhone. We'll have to see how it plays out. Again, I'm not even reading out all the commentary, right? The company wants to launch these between 2028 and 2030, for example, for the AR glasses. Honestly, if Apple plans to launch smart glasses in 2026, 2027 without a screen, I just say cancel that shit. Put all resources into just speeding up the actual reality AR glasses and launch them late 2028, early 2029, whatever is realistic, right? And just don't even launch glasses without the screen, but we'll have to see. And this also goes back to what I've mentioned about stuff like the pendant and the tabletop robot, which is Mark Gurman reports on internal Apple prototypes. Some might even have like a tentative release date in the future. But it's like Mark Gurman reports on these products with so much certainty, and he reports that release date. It's like, oh my God, this is Apple's internal plan. And then Apple changes their mind very predictably because they have so much other stuff that they're working on, and maybe they've internally decided this product needs completely different technologies, or maybe it wasn't a good idea overall. But now suddenly to us tech enthusiast, it reads like Apple is constantly lagging behind and constantly has to do delays, which is not true. 1,000 no's for every yes has always been Apple's guiding principle. And for those 1,000 no's, they have to try out a thousand things internally. And I think that the foldable iPad, while I actually think it isn't a bad idea, we'll have to see how foldable technology and everything develops in the meantime. But right now, it's not scheduled to launch anytime soon. Turnus has proven he can lead product development and build a strong hardware team. His real test now is whether he can get the rest of Apple aligned to deliver what's next. That includes fixing Siri, which again, this is Mark Gurman once again kind of doing like self-fulfilling prophecies. Siri is going to be fixed by this summer to this fall. John Turnus taking over September 1st is not going to be the reason why Siri is fixed. Siri is going to be fixed because Apple has licensed Gemini from Google under Tim Cook. It's because Apple changed leadership from G. Andrea to other people and then put those under Craig Federighi under Tim Cook. So him ascribing these things to Turnus, it seems very disrespectful to Tim, but whatever. Siri has been plagued by delays, but we now have a pretty good understanding that these delays are pretty much over. He has talked a big game, promising earth-shattering devices. Again, I also hate that, like, he talked a big game, and then he mentions it in context with Siri, which he clearly didn't mention in this. I have my problems with Gurman, to say the least. I'm glad we have him as a source, but whenever he adds his own 2 cents, it gets a tiny bit weird. And the question is whether he can make it happen. Then he promotes all his other articles. New CEO pledges to expand the services portfolio. As Apple's hardware guy, John Turnus has had little to nothing to do with the company's hottest growth engine over the past several years, the 100 billion services empire run mostly by Eddie Q. About 7 years ago, as hardware sales began to slow, Jesus, what a framing. Apple wants service revenue even if hardware is still growing fast. Did they slow down their services because the iPhone 17 family is growing again? Whatever. Cook, Q, and former Chief Financial Officer Luca Maestri prioritized moving into this world. Again, I don't know what prioritized in this context means. It kind of suggests that they prioritized it over hardware or just prioritized doing it at all. The latter would be correct, the former very much not so. So Gurman's phrasing here, once again, a problem. The good news is Turnus has no plans to slow down that division. Of course not. He is still beholden to the board. The board likes, what does the growth, I've kind of answered it. What does the board like? It likes fast growth, and it likes highly profitable businesses. Guess what's Apple's most profitable business, not in overall numbers, but as a percentage of its revenue? Well, that's Apple Services. Apple Services have an over 70% profit margin. Meanwhile, Apple's hardware is in the mid-30s. And services have grown very reliable in the double digits over the last few years, sometimes in more like the 20% range, while hardware has mostly grown in the single-digit range. So yeah, there is no world in which even the most hardware-focused guy on the planet comes in and somehow kneecaps Apple Services business. The board would instantly throw him out. But yeah, they would also do blah. Here's what he told employees in a town hall meeting this past week. I'm in awe of what you all have done on the services side. I remember when there wasn't much there, and there was sort of a plan to grow services. And every day I wake up and kind of go through a series of using our services. Whether it's Apple Music or podcasts in the car, I pay for something with Apple Pay. iCloud is constantly being used to sync all my things, and on and on and on. And then ending the day usually with something on TV, on Apple TV, which I guess he would have mentioned Apple TV Plus, but Again, that was a silly rebranding that Apple did, and it's incredible. And I think that's the beauty of what we do is we tie these things together. We have hardware, software, and we have services. I mean, I think Tim says this all the time, but I couldn't agree more. And so I look forward to continuing to expand that and continuing to look for the kinds of services where really finding the opportunities between hardware and software. Apple Pay is an incredible one. I mean, we've just changed the way that commerce works and how people buy things, and what a perfect combination of all the things we have to offer. And I think there's so much more opportunity here. Apple has also been going into not just using iPhones to pay, but also to have iPhones accept payments, basically work as payment terminals through their NFC chips. That's an opportunity where Apple can also get iPhones and other Apple devices into the hands of many more businesses. Yeah, obviously, makes sense. Turnus walks employees through his AI vision and how it will be applied at the company. During the town hall meeting, the incoming CEO promised that the company would have advances in the AI space. Cook, meanwhile, reiterated that the software team is working on Siri upgrades. Again, Gianandrea was taking off. A new guy was put in charge of Siri, who did previously oversee Apple Vision Pro, but then they also got a new head of AI in general, and all of them answered to Craig Federighi, who is, of course, Apple's Senior Vice President of Software Engineering, who now, of course, responds to Turnus, or who will now respond to Turnus as of September 1st. Yeah, we're getting iOS 27 with WWDC. None of that is a mystery to us. While he was vague, Turnus touched upon his own vision for AI and how he sees that playing into the company's future. I think of it in two ways. Sorry, I'm lisping today. Catching all the questionable wording. Yeah, Gurman knows how to write these things. I'm not even saying he is like too stupid and is doing something wrong. No. He's deliberately doing some stuff to challenge your mind to go into a specific direction that obviously benefits his narratives, which, yeah, I mean, that's not super journalistic of him. It's more like an opinion page guy. But I cannot complain too much because I'm very much an opinion guy here, right? I think of it in two ways. I think there's how can AI help us do what we do, and then there's how can AI impact the products, services, and capabilities that we deliver to our customers. On that one, I think what we do, what we've always done, is we take tech and we use it to build incredible experiences. We don't ship tech for technology's sake. That is very much out of the mouth of Steve Jobs. I couldn't agree more with that overall statement. I know it's easy to say that, but basically he is saying we're not going to ship something like a general chatbot just because everyone else is doing it without an ability to marry it to other Apple's hardware, software, Apple's identity and philosophies in a way. We're not going to suddenly completely give up on our focus on privacy, on security to ship AI. So yeah, Apple doesn't ship technology for technology's sake. Beautifully said. And I'm incredibly excited about this wave of tech because it is really profound and it's going to allow us to do some things that honestly were previously in the realm of science fiction. And we now see a path to being able to do it. This path, again, Gianandrea turnaround. I believe Mark Rockwell is the guy now responsible for Siri. I always forget the name, responsible for the broader AI team. Now Craig Federighi in charge. Now Turnus on top of all that. That's partially what he means. He sees a path together with Gemini licensing, Apple being able to use Gemini itself, but also customize it with their own technologies. It also means Apple now has new hardware, whether it's more memory bandwidth, just super much faster with AI accelerators, or just technologies that just make AI faster, whether Apple will still give a lot of attention to the neural engine or focus mostly on GPU acceleration. These are all the paths that are opening up to Apple. It's a combination of leadership change, licensing agreements, hardware developments, and even AI itself. For example, when you look at something like Qwen 3.6, 27 billion, right, which can run on something like a 32 gigabytes of RAM MacBook Pro like mine. It should also even be able to run on a 24 gigabyte device. That model, despite being the same size as previous 27 billion models, is so much better than even Qwen 3.5 right before it, and Qwen 3 and all the other previous models that could run locally. And yeah, these are the paths that he is talking about. And then internally, I think obviously AI has the potential to transform how we do things. Apple has been reported that they're mostly using Claude for internal development. That's what I like. We have so much data from all the years of building, and I think it's going to help us see that data and query that data and understand how we can make our products better. So yeah, like I said before, I think this is just the most exciting time to be building that I can ever remember. And this is coming from a hardware guy. Yeah, these are some Q&As, nothing too important here. Well, if there's anything important, like, yeah, Tim Cook has commented on that Apple Maps was his first big mistake. I think we all know that. We don't really need to get into detail about that. But what we can get into much more detail about is actually... Where's my YouTube? Is actually what is in the thumbnail on this video. And now, guys, we've been streaming for almost 1.5 hours. I'm not going to be taking, I think, phone calls today, but I have enabled it just for you guys to know in the future. And now that we hit the 1.5 hour mark, I would like to remind you guys, if you're watching this and you haven't yet done so, please consider subscribing to the channel, like the video, share it out with anybody who you think might enjoy it as well. Comment. I love interacting with a lively comment section, getting your agreements, disagreements, suggestions. You can make your chat even more important to me by making it a super chat with a small donation or a super sticker. You can also, of course, become a channel member right here on YouTube. Again, shout out to all the members already here. And you'll also find the link to the Discord and to the Twitter in the description of this channel. I'll also often leave the Discord link in the regular comments afterwards. So there are plenty of ways for you to interact with us, help us grow the community, just make this more fun and in a way more profitable for me, but also just for every member, for every commenter, for every viewer. The more people there are, the more they can interact with each other, learn from each other, see what other people are thinking, and I think that's a tremendous win for the entire community. That being said, I promised it for quite a while now. I've teased you guys along. It's in the thumbnail, which is obviously MKBHD's and Mrwhosetheboss's video on how tech companies lie to you. I'm going to put it at 1080p because I'm streaming in 1080p. I was not able to download that video. I apologize. Apparently, my YouTube Premium reached a maximum device count, even though I haven't even expanded my devices. But whatever, it should be fine. This video shouldn't be consuming that much data to interfere with my stream. However, as always, let me know what the audio and video quality is like for you. If I am too loud, if the video is too loud, I can do small adjustments. If there are any problems with the video, beyond the content, of course. Yeah, you guys know I get pretty paranoid about that. But with all of that being said, let's actually see what Aaron and Marquez have to say.
Tech companies have, I think, reached peak levels of deception. You will see incredible
so that's bullshit.
Headlines everywhere you look.
I think that we have more technology than ever. And I don't want to pause this video every 5 seconds, but this is a statement that I have heard said in the past. And I think that in the way it's true, if you consider how much tech we have right? We have smartphones, we have smart watches, we have TVs and smart TVs, we have consoles, we have PC components, we have laptops. Even inside of Apple, we have so much like variety. We have iPad minis, iPad Airs in 2 sizes, iPad Pros in 2 sizes, soon an iPhone foldable that's going to be kind of between an iPhone Pro Max and an iPad mini, right? And yes, there are more statements being made about tech than ever, but is it the most misleading time we've ever had? I'm not sure. I think that in the early smartphone days, we had so much bullcrap about stuff like megapixels. Like we had really weird performance metrics where everyone was running even their own benchmarks of choice and shit like that. We had all those gimmicky features that companies were like twisting themselves into pretzels to even know how to advertise them. Like I remember curved, like was it the LG Flex that had like that curved screen and that body that could reshape itself? We had 3D projectors on the backs of phones. We had air gestures on top of like the Galaxy S4, right? Where you could, if you had wet hands or dirty hands, you didn't have to touch your screen because okay. I would argue this is not the most misleading era, but we have the most amount of tech we've ever had. So there are more statements being made about technology. Plasma Void, yeah, I apologize for that. 2 seconds in, okay, that's bullshit. Yeah, that sounds very much like me. You hit the nail on the head. I cannot, yeah, that's what happened here.
But as soon as you peel back the clever wording, you take away the hidden asterisks, and you remove the sneaky manipulation of data
What's funny is he shows that next to the iPhone 17 Pro Max, Apple is very open to what devices they compare it to. I'm not saying that this is universally a wrong statement, but Apple is not asterisk, you look at the small text over here. It's usually right on Apple's website with what they're comparing it to. And even if there is an asterisk, that asterisk is right there, and then you scroll down on the website and you can find it. And because usually when it says it's 40% faster, it doesn't say versus last model, so they're not lying. I agree, it can be a bit misleading. This is not the same BS, but actually showing the iPhone here is I understand why he is doing that, because the iPhone is what sells the video, right? Like even in the thumbnail, of course, they're showing an Apple logo and the word lies. That's why my thumbnail shows me with a face palm under that logo.
realize that
But it's not entirely true either.
never in history has such little change been sold to us as if it's so much. So I've teamed up with
There is another perspective on this that I try to always tell people. It's actually hard to put into words sometimes, so I'll try it for you guys. I feel it's not actually appreciated enough that the current technology we have is improving at the rate of 10, 15, or sometimes even 20% per year. Now, this is me talking specifically about raw performance, but there are other metrics. Obviously, there are specific computational tasks like ray tracing and AI acceleration, the image signal processor speed, but then there are other components like the peak 5G download speeds that you can have, right? But the thing that I want to mention about 10, 15, 20% improvements, they might sound very much like diminishing returns versus the past, where, for example, when you look at upgrading from the iPhone 4 to the 4S, which is infamous for the big improvement, it got 2 times the CPU performance, so it basically had the same single core performance, but it had 2 of those cores, and on a more efficient node and shit like that. And it had 7 times more GPU performance. In fact, the iPad 2 that moved on from the iPad 1, went from the A4 to the A5 chip, actually promised a 9 times performance improvement. Well, just for you to put into the comparison, those 10% improvements that we're getting these days, they're actually bigger than the entire performance of something like the iPhone 4S, which represented a 7x improvement over the iPhone that came before it. So while these improvements have definitely slowed down as a percentage, as a nominal value, they're actually higher than than they have ever been in a way. So again, I'm not saying that should make you run out and buy every piece of hardware, because it shouldn't, right? You should still be careful with your money and everything else. But I do feel when people are saying, oh, it's just 10% faster, it's impressive that we are still getting all these gains, especially when these gains happen without having to resort to like an actively cooled smartphone, or, oh, suddenly this runs well, but only if you pair it with like a 7,000 milliampere hour battery, or, oh, this runs well, but actually, yeah, we had to kind of double the vapor chamber size, which is still good as a final product. I'm not against larger batteries or larger vapor chambers, but it does suggest a compromise. The fact that, for example, with Apple, we've gotten battery life improvements, cooling improvements, and performance improvements, all without suddenly getting that much thicker and heavier again, kind of cool. And I think it's a little bit underrated. Plasma Void, tech has come a long way in the last 10 years. It can be easy for it all to blur together. That's correct.
Marquez from MKBHD to show you how they get you. And I feel like we have to start with the magic new catch-all term of the tech industry.
AI.
Up to.
Oh, I thought he meant AI, but then again, that would actually reflect really poorly on him, because he is the #1 AI simp. Of all the major YouTubers, he is the one who will put AI into camera reviews and give like a point to win for, like, even though a smartphone might be much worse in terms of overall cameras, or at least measurably worse, right? He'll be like, well, but it has much better AI features, so you might consider that instead. Oh.
What we need to see, and what we used to see a lot more of, is this new product is X%.
Okay, so this is already wrong by every metric, because these numbers have always been up to. There can be specific benchmarks, but these numbers have never been exactly 70% faster, baby, at every given moment. Don't forget, by the way, you see something that Apple did here, which he actually probably doesn't have the technical know-how to even fully appreciate, which is 25% faster than A10 with the performance cores. And then the efficiency cores by themselves are 70% faster. But don't forget, the efficiency cores are a very small part of the overall multi-threaded performance. So in a way, that number should actually be much closer in the end to 25% than to 70, maybe like 40. But Apple had a new performance controller which allowed the A11 chip to simultaneously use its P and E cores. So when the iPhone 7 came actually out, the A10 chip was not capable of utilizing those chips simultaneously for multi-threaded tasks. You were using either the performance cores for something and the efficiency cores for something else, maybe mainly background tasks, right? Or, for example, when your device goes to sleep, you were only using like the efficiency cores. So the new Apple design performance controllers is 70% faster in multi-threaded workloads. That's correct, because it allows you to combine the P and E cores together. But one thing that he's leaving out here is that most tasks were not getting 70% faster. The efficiency gains from gen to gen were not significant enough to allow for that. The cooling improvements were not enough to sustain that. And many smartphone tasks were not written for 6 threads at that time. Mainly they were written for 2 threads on the performance cores or for 4 threads on the efficiency cores. And even then, the efficiency cores mainly handled background tasks. So they were mainly written for the 2 performance cores. So that 70% faster number, maybe if a task was really written for more threads than the system previously could even access, sure. But this number is very much an up to and very much in select tests. So the fact that he doesn't understand that, does not bode well for the rest of the video. Ooh, I think this is going to be a long one for me.
Better than the last one. Ooh. This very simple idea basically doesn't exist anymore. Practically every...
It never existed, baby. Never existed exactly. But the reason why we have up to is mainly a carefulness. There's been so much bullshit like lawsuits and things like that. And there is so much more attention to stuff like benchmark these days that companies are just a little bit more careful in their wording. These numbers were never perfect promises. And the fact that you believe that is baffling.
Single tech company quotes every single change as up to.
Up to 2 times faster. Gets up to 8 more hours.
Is up to 2 times.
But isn't it funny? Because it doesn't say that on the text, right? If you just took out the text here, as you did from the previous video, it would suggest it's the audio that makes it. I promise you, if you go back to Apple's previous keynotes, you will find up to as well. Up to is not a new term in the tech industry. Plasma Void already despising this video. I'm already developing high blood pressure.
You'll notice they don't even write it as up to a lot of the time.
Yes, because they never did. In fact, they write that on their website where they obviously get much more exact. But these numbers, even the ones that you posted before, those were up to numbers as well. You beep, beep, beep.
They'll just like mutter it quickly under their breath, like it's some sort of pedantic foot as up to a lot of the time.
Okay, let's listen to this.
More hours.
Is up to 2 times.
Did that sound to you guys like muttering under their breaths?
Fast.
Up to 2 times faster.
Up to sounds totally normal.
Gets up to 8 more hours.
Up to 8 more hours.
Is
up to 2 times faster. Did it sound like they were muttering it under their breaths? Like, did it actually sound misleading, or did he just try to convince you of that conveniently after playing the clip, right? Not letting it actually up to your brain to process it afterwards by doing it very shortly next to each other.
2 times faster.
You'll notice they don't even write it as up to a lot of the time. They'll just like mutter it quickly under.
You see how tech companies lie to you, but also how YouTubers and tech, in this case, tech YouTubers lie to you, right? That he posted text of a previous keynote, right? He did not play audio by Phil Schiller, which might have included some up-tos. I can remember Apple's keynotes very well. I do not remember the exact promises they made for the A11 processors versus the A10. But you see the clever tricks he employed. The same tricks he promised he hated on the side of the tech companies.
Their breath, like it's some sort of pedantic footnote that you don't need to pay attention to.
But you need to pay attention to it, but you don't need to pay more attention to it than you did in the past. This has always applied.
But if you think about it, any stat that starts with an up to doesn't mean anything. I can say this.
It does. Oh, because that doesn't mean it's entirely false. Up to can mean something like, if it's up to 2 times faster, it can mean that in certain benchmarks, it will be exactly 2 times faster. In others, it might be closer to 80 or 90%. It does not mean that it's entirely a lie and can actually be like 10% slower or something like that.
This video is going to reach up to 1 billion people. And if it only ends up reaching my parents and then like one cousin in India.
So this is one criticism that I've seen online. Why are we doing AI here for a meme that already exists? Like, you could have easily edited by using your professional editor. Is there a reason why you're using AI? To cheap out on an important collaboration video.
I was still right. And you could argue, well, you know, workloads are more complex now. It's harder to estimate.
Yeah, exactly. And there are so many tasks that might not entirely benefit from every single accelerator that you built in. That is actually correct.
Exactly how much better something is. But the real reason this is being used is very clear. It's to be able to stick a massive number on your webpage and not be sued for it.
But that has always happened. Where does he take, like, and again, this is also, so he, in a way, he's actually complaining, and think about it. I'm not saying this in the defense of the companies. I will say that sometimes the up to numbers are a bit too high Though usually on Apple's website, they're actually quite reliable. But NVIDIA has actually been one of the more egregious ones where they will compare completely non-comparable features, where they will compare native rendering on the previous generation with multi-frame generation on the new one, which these frames are AI generated. They do not actually reduce latency. They can actually increase it in production. So yeah, that is unfair to even compare that, much less to say up to. But in a way, he's actually complaining that companies are more careful and actually give you something to hang on to say, maybe maybe that promise, I should take it with a grain of salt, right? While previously they would just tell you it's 3 times faster and you would blindly believe it, but it would be the same up to as it is now. Plasma Void, I 100% see why you included the face mole in the thumbnail. Holy shit. I'm adding the shit. You left it out, I'm adding shit.
So if you see up to followed by a percentage improvement, honestly, just disregard it and go search up specifically how much better that product is in exactly what you're planning on doing with it.
Wait, but that's something you should have always done. This has applied always. When was it ever correct when Apple said the iPhone 4S was 7 times faster in graphics than the iPhone 4? Does that mean that it was running everything 7% faster? Every animation that might be GPU bound or something like that? If Apple said the iPhone 4S was 2 times faster in CPU performance in multi-threaded workloads, because obviously it went from a single core to a multi-core, but a lot of tasks are still single core dependent, is it actually fair to say it's 2 times faster? That has always been correct.
But I'll leave the next one.
Like, it has always been correct for you that you should look up specific tests.
Up to you, Marquez.
Okay, so in
Oh
announcement...
my God, we're just 1.5 minutes into this video, and I think I already spent like 20 minutes on my reaction. This is gonna drive me insane. Guys, send me super chats to compensate.
Keynotes and a lot of advertising specifically. A lot of companies like to do this thing where they combine a bunch of different specs from different versions of the same product into one page, creating what I like to call the imaginary spec. So like one of the most common versions you'll see is a company will put like the maximum up to performance number alongside the minimum starting at price.
Yeah,
And they'll put 'em-
I actually agree. Yeah, I think that these numbers can be misleading. I think this is a much fairer point. Now, obviously, this is visual confusion. You will see the exact specs while you spec up, for example, your car and things like that. For Apple, it happens a little bit, like, for example, when Apple says the 16-inch MacBook Pro has like up to 24 hours of battery life or something like that, that's for the M5 Pro version. The M5 Max will get you a few hours less, but obviously when they advertise performance numbers, they will quote the M5 Max numbers. Now, they actually let you see both M5 Pro versus previous Pros on the website too. You have to maybe look into that a little bit, and you can look at those numbers up even on their spec comparison sheet with current versus prior generations. So I'm trying to make this Apple centric. Cars are worse in that regard because these websites are usually much worse built than Apple's. They also emit much less. They also use the fact that the people buying cars usually don't even know that much about cars, unfortunately, because you kind of need a car, right? Man, it's hard. This one is more fair. I think this one is more fair than the up to, even though we literally have an up to element here.
next to each other in a product where you can't actually get the maximum performance for the minimum price. Here's Rivian, for example, on the R1T website. You'll see, wow, 420 miles of range and a 0 to 60 in under 2.5 seconds, starting at
Yeah, and you cannot combine these things, right? Because to get the fastest acceleration, you'll need the fastest motors. which at that point your estimates, your range estimates actually drop down and your price increases. So these features are all up tos in the best case scenario, which for the estimated range, it actually means getting the lower performance version, and the lower price obviously means you are not getting the other high-end tech stuff.
At under $74,000. But not exactly, because the one with 420 miles of range is the dual motor, which has a 3.4 second 0 to 60.
Yep.
Still quick, but the 2.5 second version costs $30,000 more and has 40 miles less range. And for $73,000, you don't get either of those things.
Yep.
So yeah, this here is an imaginary spec.
Yeah, that is correct. That I will actually say that is fair. And in fact, one thing that I would actually say, and you will see that they gave asterisks here, which I assume is something simple like depending on the configuration, right? But actually an up to number would be much fairer in this case, right?
Oh, and by the way, that's another one while we're at it. EV range claims. Now, there are laws around how accurate your range claims actually have to be, just like with gas mileage.
There are even standardized organizations that test for all of this. Yeah, that's correct. And different regions have their own ones. Europe has one, China has one, North America has one.
And some companies are a little more optimistic about that range claim than others.
It's not really companies. These companies are beholden to pretty strict government-based standards. It's just that different regions will have different testing methodologies. Usually the European numbers actually tend to be on the higher side. North American numbers tend to be on the lower side, and Chinese estimates tend to be somewhere in between.
Fine, but the fact is we are still pretty early in this battery tech, and the tiniest, even seemingly insignificant things can make a pretty significant difference to your range. And so even when you break it all the way down to specific Rivian models, the one that does the 2.5 second 0 to 60, you can see that 374 mile range claim right here. But when you actually click in, that's when you realize that's on a specific wheel with a specially designed sticky Michelin tire. And then, oh, look at that. You're actually getting 338 miles of range. You'll have to switch down to the standard sport wheel and tire to get the 374 miles of estimated range. So yes, even this here was an imaginary spec. And I promise you, Rivian is far from the only offender in the world of cars and in tech.
And if you thought that
Okay,
companies
that was fair.
exaggerating their specs to seem better than others is a problem, then how about when companies just invent entirely new specs so that you can't even compare them to others? When companies start to build loyalty, they want to be able to charge more for the same stuff. But
Are the way. Number 2 yapper after just one message. So I assume you have been here watching for a while saying, hi, I'm back after so long. Well, welcome to the stream, bro. I've missed you. I think you first joined the streams during the Apple M4 generation presentations, right? I remember I was at my cousin's when I was doing those presentations. I remember reading your names. This is when we had like 200 people in the live chat.
how do you get away with that in a world where a comparison is just one quick ChatGPT search away? Well, make it so confusing for customers to compare you that the easiest thing then becomes for them to just take your word for it that you're better. One of the most prolific examples of this right now is RAM. Any computer, any phone, any laptop, even your smartwatch needs RAM to be able to juggle tasks. And this is true no matter which company's product it is. But Apple now refers to their RAM almost exclusively as unified memory.
Okay, so okay, we are getting okay. You know what? I'm gonna listen to what he has to say, and then I'm gonna utterly destroy him with my superior intellect.
I can say this because their RAM is actually part of their chip as opposed to a separate computer.
That's not what unified memory means, but it can benefit from it. Being part of the package gives it lower latency, higher efficiency, but it's not what unified means in this case. Unified means CPU and GPU can access the RAM almost at the same amount and rate. For Apple, it means pretty much at the exact same amount. There are some bandwidth differences where the peak bandwidth will usually be close to the max GPU number. The CPU number will be lower, but Apple's CPU memory bandwidth is actually going often significantly higher than what you see from competitors. They create much more lanes of connection between the CPU and the RAM. Plus, they're usually pretty generous with their last level cache or system level cache, which then kind of feeds into the RAM as well. But yeah, unified in this case does not mean on package. It means unified with for equal access for SoC components.
Which does make that RAM a little more efficient in some ways. But it glosses over a very important detail, that Windows laptops often have dedicated graphics cards that have their own additional pool of RAM.
Which is worse, because that additional pool of... Okay, so you don't... Oh my God, I have to listen to what he has to say. I don't want to criticize him for not knowing things if he knows them.
Whereas unified memory means that both the CPU and the GPU share from one small pool.
Yes.
So you're pretty much always getting less RAM. And
No, you pretty much always get more RAM. No, oh my God. No, for the GPU, it means that for the CPU, yes. For the CPU, it means you're getting less RAM, well, or potentially less, depending on how much you even utilize your CPU. That's a different topic. For the GPU, that's completely different. And oh my God, a dedicated GPU will only have the memory that it has, which is usually 8, 16, 24, can be as little as 4, while Apple, well, on the MacBook Neo, their unified memory starts with 8, but even as far back as the M4 already, they've standardized 16, which means that the base M4 chip will have more memory available for its GPU than something like an RTX 5060 laptop, or like, this is insane. Oh my God, how do you not know these things? This is so basic. This is partially what made Apple Silicon so wonderful and so performant for GPUs. Also, and that's something I'm not saying, oh, 8 gigabytes on Macs perform like 16 gigabytes on Windows. It's a little bit of a misnomer. I would argue 12 gigabytes on macOS would perform as good, sometimes better than 16 gigabytes on Windows. But for everything else, yeah, 8 to 16 is a very large gap. But one thing that people leave out is that because there is no dedicated amount of RAM and no dedicated extra chip for something like the GPU, the communication, the amount of copying data back and forth between your CPU and its cache and its memory and your GPU and its cache and its memory, like that is all things that actually make you consume more RAM on those two piles of RAM, basically your CPU and your GPU RAM, or VRAM, video memory, or dedicated memory, whatever. No, unified memory does not mean you basically always get less RAM. This statement almost could not be more wrong. And I understand that this is an oxymoron to combine these two, but this is basically what it comes down to. Oh my God.
Yeah, I mean, Apple executives have famously boasted about how their unified memory is so efficient that just 8 gigabyte of it is equivalent to 16 gigs on Windows, but it's not really true. They're just...
That's not... The unified memory is not what makes this. That's only one part. It's the unified memory... It's, which by the way, unified memory exists for other SoCs. No, the reason why they're partially advertising it that way is also the efficiency of macOS. It was never just oh my God, he has no idea. That's what happens when you just react to quotes. Guys, you guys know, beyond my love for tech, I'm also very much a history buff. Like, obviously, I'm in medicine, right? But I kind of don't do much medicine outside of work. I leave work at work, and at home I focus on other stuff, which is primarily tech as a hobby, but also I do a lot of reading on history. And one thing that I absolutely despise is when people use quotes to describe somebody's philosophy who has actually been a big leader of a country or something like that, right? When people will be, oh, this person wrote this and that in their diary 10 years before they did this and that, right? And I'm like, okay, but you realize that this person also has a very big track record of actual deeds. Maybe at some point they wrote something in the heat of their anger or something in a letter or in a diary, right? But this person does not necessarily, this one quote does not shape this entire person. Now people are using this one quote with an Apple engineer who says 8 gigs of Mac is kind of equivalent to 16 gigabytes on Windows. He does not just mean it's because of unified memory. He means because of the efficiency of macOS, Apple's greater control of the entire platform, even Apple's own first-party design solutions. That's what he means.
Be a hard cap on how much multitasking you're able to do, because 8 gigs is 8 gigs. But even so, can you see how this whole concept of unified memory still helps Apple? It makes something as simple as RAM feel like some sort of gray area, which means...
Yes, but that's exactly what happens, because the best mobile GPU that you can have is the RTX 5090 mobile. Guess how much RAM you can use for something like a large Blender project or a large AI for it? It's 24 gigabytes. Guess how much RAM you can use on the M5 Max? You can use 128 gigabytes. And even if you give up some of that for the operating system, that's still 3-4 times more than on the RTX 5090 mobile. And that's not even comparing it. He also said it's a little bit more efficient, which is complete bullshit. It's way more efficient than VRAM especially, right? Like when you compare the power consumption of an RTX 5080 mobile, for example, I'm using deliberately a smaller part. I'm not even using the 160 watt RTX 5090 mobile. But when you use something like an RTX 5080 mobile, that will consume 2 times more power than the M5 Max. And yes, there is a note advantage and stuff like that, but the memory is part of it. GDDR7 consumes way more power than LPDDR5X. There is a reason why that memory is even called LP. It stands for low power DDR memory. We have standard DDR memory. That's what you use on CPUs, for example. And then we have GDDR, which is graphics memory, and that one will usually consume even more power. Oh God. And that RTX 5080 mobile, which will consume 2 times more power than the RTX, than the M5 Max, will also simultaneously limit you to 16 gigabytes of available VRAM. Plasma Void, this fellow you're watching is looking at these topics with blinders on and ignoring glaring variables. Crazy. There is so much bullshit marketing that AMD, Intel, and NVIDIA do to use unified memory. Yikes.
They can give you a lot.
You know he was desperately looking for marketing terms that Apple uses because Apple sells, right? This video would have gotten 1/5 the views if it was primarily focused on the likes of AMD.
Less of it.
Respect to Marquez for actually starting to talk about cars and actually even like Hyundais rather than Teslas or something like that.
And they can charge you more to upgrade it than any other company. I'd say, to be honest, though,
but they did that even before unified memory. That's not true. Apple has always charged more for memory. Look at the prices that they charged on previous MacBooks. They always charged more per gigabyte of storage and per gigabyte of RAM. This was way before the unified memory. Does he have a does he have a long-term memory issue? Does he suffer from dementia? Has he forgotten the Intel days, which are just 5-6 years past?
First example of the invented spec is the TV market. TV makers will try absolutely everything to make you feel like you're getting the real deal, apart from actually giving it to you. Like when Hisense tells you that a TV has a motion rate of 120, it doesn't actually mean that the TV has a 120 hertz.
Yeah, it can mean it has 60 hertz refresh rate with frame interpolation, basically frame smoothing. It's disgusting, and this term should be banned, in my opinion.
Refresh rate, like you think. And like clearly many other people have been led into believing motion rate is another.
Which is funny because, right, you see how with unified memory, he kind of had to bend over backwards to make it sound bad, right? Like it's not real. Here, he actually has a term that is contradicted by the actual tech spec and by the actual expectations that consumers have, right? Notice how he doesn't have comments from people saying, oh, unified memory, why do I not get VRAM, right? While here, people are actually complaining, oh, this term is actually completely misleading, right? So he could have done this story, but he did unified memory because he wanted to focus primarily on Apple.
Invented spec that just means the TV is running Hisense's motion smoothing software. Or let's say that you tell your less tech savvy.
Isn't it funny how I don't even have to? There's no pre-watch on my part here whatsoever. Isn't it funny that I don't have to look any of this up? I know this because I actually love technology. I'm super immersed in technology. I'm not trying to either badmouth companies because I will criticize them when they deserve it. I'll criticize the absolute living shit out of them, right? But I'm also not talking down to consumers. I'm not saying to consumers, oh, you poor body, you're the little guy, you're automatically correct because you were too stupid to understand something. No, a minimum amount of research to understand a term like unified memory is very different than looking at the company even using 120 in its page and then not actually delivering 120 hertz or even like a 120 sampling rate for like a touchscreen. At least that would be a way to integrate 120 without actually making the screen 120 hertz.
Buddy, to make sure you get a TV that has OLED tech. What are the chances that they accidentally end up buying a Hisense ULED or a Samsung QLED or a...
Yeah, these are different technologies. ULED is just bullshit. QLED actually stands for quantum LED. There's also quantum OLED, which is on a completely different level. These technologies primarily focus on just better image quality some way. They usually are paired with at least superior backlight technology than just standard LCD, like usually something like mini LED. These are questionable, a little bit borderline. But again, this is something where I'm like, well, you were looking for OLED and now you're looking at QLED. It is a different letter, right? You can just type it into Google. Even before ChatGPT or Gemini, you could just ask difference between OLED and QLED, and you would get a pretty good response on that.
LG QNED. I'd say pretty high, even though all of these are in fact invented specs.
I mean, if you mistake QNED for OLED because of the last two letters, yeah, then you're a moron. I'm sorry. This is like, again, ULED, QLED, but man, like QNED? Really? 2 out of 4 letters and you decide it's the same?
Designed, I think, to camouflage as OLED, even though they're actually much cheaper LCDs.
Now, okay.
Yes, not always. Like QLEDs for a while have actually tried to be kind of an alternative to OLED because big screen OLEDs were very difficult to make. And they had big downsides, for example, for features like all screen brightness levels. So they're like ULED, QNED, I would actually kind of agree, though. QLED from Samsung actually was a pretty solid technology.
Maybe you're not convinced, all right? Maybe you're watching this thinking, you know, it's fine if they make up specs as long as they're technically true. But I'll do you one better. What if there's made up specs that are actually numerically, factually false? I actually made an entire separate video all about this, but 1-inch camera sensors are not 1 inch in any dimension.
Yeah, okay. This is something that I can very quickly go through some examples here. The best one, except for camera sensor sizes, is actually, of course, nanometers for transistor sizes on modern processors, right? 2 nanometer processors do not have 2 nanometer wide transistors, not even close. It's actually 10 times that when you look at the gate pitch. But these are terms that have been established for a while. It's basically impossible for the tech industry to move beyond them. They have been lying to you as far back as like 48 nanometer, 80 nanometer. Those were not that. Yeah, it has almost become like a turn of art or whatever that saying is, right? That phrase. It's basically, it's almost like a term used by like somebody very deep in the materia who understands why they're using something that might actually be technically misleading, right? but then again, like no exact measurement on, for example, for a sensor is actually like in the diagonal and whatever. Like it doesn't help you really, because you should actually have the exact area, right? And then on top of that, the actual, like, if you want it to be even more correct, you would also need to understand how large are the pixels. Basically, just like with transistors, what's the size of an individual pixel / transistors? What's the size of the gap between a pixel and a pixel, a transistor and a transistor? These become so technical that most people would just not pay attention to that kind of spec. I understand the criticism.
And 1.5K displays are actually not 1500 pixels in any dimension.
No, they're 1440p usually, but usually 1.5K screens on smartphones, for example, they will not be 2560 by 1440, but they will actually be significantly wider than 2560, and for example, be something like 3120. So while they might not reach the 1500 in width, in terms of resolution, instead being 1440p, instead they actually are much taller or wider. Again, it depends on your perspective, right? You can hold a smartphone in portrait mode, you can look in a video in landscape. So this term, it depends. Is 1.5K just the height / width for you, or is it actually the exact 2560 by 1440p resolution? The same thing goes with a 4K, right? It's technically 3840 by 2160. Is that far enough for you, 3840 from 4000, to actually consider it misleading? Is rounding up the same as lying?
Either. How is that possible? Well, it's because the way we measure things has changed. Like something like this camera, for example. This is a Sony ZV-1. A lot of cameras like it. This camera has a 1-inch sensor. It says so on their website. And that sounds amazing. A 1-inch sensor in this little camera? Have you ever looked inside like a pro DSLR or mirrorless camera at the size of that sensor? That looks like about a 1-inch sensor. So this must also have a huge sensor like that. But it's not.
No.
It's way smaller. Why is that? Well, turns out this is a 1-inch sensor because in 2026, that's what we call a 1-inch type sensor. See, before digital cameras didn't have sensors at all. They actually used vacuum tubes. And so the size of the tube was actually what they measured. So a 1-inch vacuum tube would create an image area inside it closer to about 16 millimeters diagonally. And that is actually about the size.
This is what I was going at, because I'm more familiar, obviously, with the history of like transistors and nodes than I am with cameras. But we usually adopt terms from previous technologies to make the transition easier. But in that, especially in something like a switch from an analog to a digital technology, right, we lose so much coherence in that understanding that it's basically done in a way to benefit the consumer. But ultimately, if you are a super actually enthusiastic and informed consumer, you will actually be more confused by it.
Of the 1-inch type sensor in this camera. So it's 2026, but we're calling this a 1-inch sensor because that is the size of the theoretical vacuum tube that would be required to produce an image the size of this sensor. Why? Turns out 1-inch sensor is a marketing name more than it is an actual measurement.
Yep.
And I have the same beef with displays, because you've probably already heard a lot of smartphones recently have like 1.5K displays. You've heard this? You've seen a lot of these floating around? But none of them have 1500 pixel measurements. So what's going on here? See, this is where it gets weird. Okay, so intuitively, we all agree that 4K, for example, is referring to the horizontal resolution, right? So this video is 4K because it's 4,000 pixels across, roughly.
No, yeah, roughly. It's 3840. It's literally not 4K.
It's 4096 by 2048. Sometimes it's 3840 by 2160, but it's roughly...
Yeah, a 16:9 video is going to be 3840 by 2160. I understand. 4096 is not something that most people are going to use.
4,000 pixels wide. And 8K would be 8,000 pixels wide. But at some point, for some reason, we started calling 2560 by 1440 2K, which is close.
Oh, wait, does 1.5K refer to like 1200p? Because then I would actually agree. Then I would actually revise my previous... Like, I wouldn't call, for example, the iPhone 17 Pro Max screens, which I believe is, what, 1280? On that measurement, a 1.5K screen, I wouldn't accept that.
But a little bit off. And then for some reason, 1080p, which is now referring to the vertical resolution,
Full HD.
is 1K, which is weird because 1080p is actually 1920 by 1080, so it should be 2K,
Yeah.
but now we're calling 1080p 1K, and so now smartphone companies are using 1.5K to refer to a measurement somewhere in between 1080p and 1440p. So it's not actually 1500 across or 1500 tall. It just means somewhere in between 1K and 2K, and that's super annoying to me.
Oh, I actually haven't seen that much then. Yeah, it's a weird term. I would also say it was always wrong to call 1080p 1K by the logic of 4K. I don't even know what I would say about it, because I definitely wouldn't want Apple, for example, to advertise the iPhone 17 Pro Max's screen as 1.5K, because to me, 1.5 would refer to something like 1440p. Is that the term that like Chinese manufacturers made up? Because I have not seen it used by Samsung or somebody like that.
It's how we talk now.
And that's if there's even a hardware change at all with new products. What's becoming increasingly common these days is this focus on vaguely defined new software features. So if you're launching a new...
You do that. You give points for AI features for cameras.
smartphone, let's say, you're holding a big event and a live stream to tell people what's new about it, then the thing that is useful to see is what specifically is new about that product. A good example of this is the...
Nope. I disagree with that. I think it's totally fair, and I will die on this hill because I know that many people actually disagree with that. I always find it weird when people complain that a feature that's not exclusive to a piece of hardware is being advertised with new hardware. To me, that has always been weird because I come from a background of like really caring about stuff like games and things like that. And there are games that will be, for example, exclusive to the PS4, the PS5, at some point the PS6, right? But when I look, for example, at PC games, and when I look at the new graphics card coming out, I would expect that graphics card to show a game that's very much not exclusive to this graphics card or a new family of graphics cards, right? Let's see.
privacy display on Samsung's Galaxy S26 Ultra. It's a software feature, but it's one that actually required them to physically change the way they built the display to work. So it's made for this phone. But unfortunately, the vast majority of new features that we actually see marketed here are not that. Like if we pull up the Galaxy S24 event, they spent this much time talking about the new Samsung AI features. And then...
But that's because it's not just... Oh my God, this is also wrong. And I don't want to defend Samsung here. You guys know how much I hate their events. But it's because they're not just advertising because you mentioned how he is reacting to a channel that's called Tag One. This is not Samsung. He's saying Galaxy S24 Ultra live event. But when you actually look at how Samsung advertises these events, they're just called Galaxy Unpacked. They're advertising more than just the phone. You could make a better point in saying that they are basically reintroducing the same AI features year to year to year, right? I've reacted to that during the Galaxy S26 presentation, where it was like, wait, didn't they show this feature like 2 years ago already, right? But but it's not bad that they show some software at a hardware event, just as it's not bad to show hardware at a software event.
Literally just as long talking about Circle to Search. They talked about it like it's this revolutionary new feature that's only made possible thanks to Samsung's deep partnership with Google.
Our partnership continues to go strong as we create new ways to do more with Google on Galaxy devices.
But Circle to Search is also on Google phones. It's on Xiaomi phones. It's not really going...
But it wasn't actually on all of those devices. It actually took some software updates for that feature to be implemented. Previously, it was Google phone exclusive. Then Circle to Search came to Samsung's, and after a time, some AI features from Google actually launched first on Samsung, and then the broader industry with a newer version of Android that standardized features like Circle to Search all adopted it as well. Was it slightly misleading? Maybe, but it was still worth showing it off just so people know that this feature exists. In fact, this feature for a while made Google Pixels and Samsung devices look more attractive than the iPhone before it got something like visual intelligence.
To do with Samsung, apart from just them being the first to show it. And they do this...
But it wasn't just the first to show it. It was also the first to ship it, sometimes by weeks, sometimes even by months.
Every year to buff out their
Oh
presentations.
my God, I'm defending Samsung. I'm defending Samsung because Aaron didn't do his research.
And try to make you associate those Google features with Samsung. And it's not just confusing which features are also coming to other brands, where I think it gets...
Yes, because one brand is not forced to make advertisements for another brand. That other brand can come out and make their own event, make their own website. It's a complaint that I hear whenever a console shows off a game for its system that is also cross-platform, and people will be like, well, you're kind of lying to us. You're saying you're presenting it almost at like it's an exclusive, and you're like, no, not really. I'm just saying, look, it's coming to our platform, and no, as PlayStation, as Tim PlayStation, right, will not come out and put a Nintendo Switch 2 logo during our keynote that cost us money to make, that required us getting all our spokespeople out and stuff like that, filming and everything else. We're not going to do free advertisement for Nintendo. We're not going to do free advertisement for Steam and PC. We're not going to do free advertisement for Xbox. The same thing here. Samsung is not going to do free advertisement for Xiaomi and Huawei and Oppo. Not Huawei, but you know what I mean.
Really intentionally confusing at these launch events is which features that you're talking about are also coming to your own older phones. Don't get me wrong.
That I will actually agree. But I would also bet that part of it might be because Samsung is not always sure. Because Samsung might sometimes takes 3-4 months to bring new features to older devices. That's usually because they have the latest operating system much more polished, much more early for newer hardware than older ones. But then sometimes with some other software features, they might just not be sure.
It's a good thing that big companies support their older models. I mean, they kind of have to. They did promise you when you bought them. But the thing that's misleading is spending 60% of the next
Which is
phone's
funny
launch-
because, right, he mentions that. But you know which company actually doesn't promise you a certain number of update years? It's Apple. But they still do it, right? So it's not just about promise. It's about customer expectations. You would have that expectation whether that promise was made or not. I promise you that. Maybe you wouldn't have the exact expectation of 7 years of software updates, or 5 years of updates, 7 years of security drops, but you would still have some expectation. There is a reason why people stopped mostly buying phones like Sony, which have abysmal update support.
And talking about how it's the coolest phone in the world and you should upgrade because it has all these next-gen features, but they're never mentioning that those features are also coming to the phone that you're watching the event on.
We added a brand new capability that goes beyond device control. Now Bixby can bring you up-to-date information directly in the conversation.
So you see how this new Bixby is being positioned as one of the perks of the Galaxy S20.
And isn't it funny how he just criticizes? For example, one thing he doesn't do, he doesn't provide a counterpoint, right? He doesn't say that Apple is actually much better in that regard. Why? Because Apple has a dedicated software event, making it much clearer which features are launching on all hardware. And then when a hardware event comes around, usually it's pretty clear which features are entirely exclusive to the new one, whether it's justified or not. I agree, sometimes Apple does lock new software features behind newer hardware a bit egregiously, less than the difference in hardware specs would actually justify. But usually it's pretty clear. But he does only criticize. He does not actually provide you a counterpoint.
6 series, but actually it can run on even a Galaxy S23. And this kind of stuff is genuinely most of these launch events now. And speaking of older products, what's with companies now who launch a new product, but then only compare it to another product that came out like 3+ years ago?
Okay, so this is something that I will destroy him for. Let's listen.
For this, like take the latest MacBook Pros. So we go to the performance section and the headline number is, oh, would you look at that? Up to 8 times faster AI performance. So they've got the up to in there, they've got the specific use case, all to make sure that they have this super impressive quotable 8 times number, but then also it's 8 times faster than the M1.
Okay, so you see how in early in the video he said, oh, they put that up to number, they whisper it under their breath, they basically hide it. It literally is the start. It's literally in the same thick letters, right? Also, he said 8 times faster. Apple mentions the specific task here, AI performance. Apple is open, for which they put it literally in the same thick letters, in the same subtitle here. Why are they comparing it to the M1? Well, I can answer it to you definitively and very easily. It's for the same reason that when Apple was introducing the M2 or M3, they were not comparing it to the M1, but rather to Intel devices, because that's the people they expect to be buying this, right? It's very simple. It's because the M5 is not meant for owners of M4. It would be wasted marketing space on their website, even though they still offer, by the way, comparisons to immediately previous generations. But this is something that tech viewers on YouTube have complained about for years. Why you as a YouTuber are giving us 10-15% comparisons between something like M1 and M2. I don't have M1 yet if I'm looking at M2. Please compare it to a somewhat modern Intel device, right? This is exactly what Apple is doing. It's something that actual consumers have asked for. It's something that you, as a tech channel who wants a little bit of his work being done by Apple up ahead, because you want to compare M4 to M5, obviously, right? But no, it's like Rene Ritchie was really good about that stuff. He was really understanding of why companies will make multi-generational comparisons. That's because that older generation is where most upgraders will come from. Most M5 buyers will not be M4 or even M3 owners. I myself, as an M1 user, an M1X, sure, a powerful M1, am not planning to upgrade even to the M5 family of chips. I'm waiting for the M6 or even the M7 generation, obviously alongside features like tandem OLED, potentially 5G integration, right? But this is why Apple is actually doing something incredibly consumer, I'm not going to say friendly, but consumer facing here. Because while this number might be less exciting to tech nerds like us, not sure if I should count Aaron under that, but it's actually a much more relevant number to regular people.
Family.
What?
These are the M5 generation chips released in 2026, and they're comparing them to the M1s released across 2020 and 2021. 5 to 6 years apart. And what they would say is, well, you know, many users
Yeah, because that's the upgrade cycle.
will be upgrading from an M1. We're just being helpful. To which I would say, if I was using a worn down, slightly busted 6-year-old M1 laptop, my decision is not, do I upgrade? It's actually, do I upgrade to the M5 or do
No.
I instead buy the last gen M4 and save a bunch of money? How much
Wait, that's just you decided that arbitrarily. Some people just like to buy whatever is the newest. Like some people buy the MacBook Neo because it has pretty colors. Yeah, and you can look up comparisons between M4 and M5. Apple's website is not meant for every single owner of every single device configuration to get the exact performance scaling number in every single benchmark.
difference is there between those two choices? I don't know. Apple won't tell me.
It's actually 3 to 4x in pre-fill AI. The M4 to the M5 has actually had the largest AI uplift. So it's more linearly going from M1 to M3, and then it gets this, M1, M2, decent for M4, and then a massive gap for M5. That's because of the neural accelerators on the GPU.
Is a thinly veiled tactic to help take
Yeah, this is wrong.
what is in most instances
This is entirely wrong. There's no linear progression for that specific task that Apple mentioned. AI has seen way bigger uplifts than that.
like 5 to 10% of real-world improvement, all the way into these astonishing sounding numbers like 8 times. But let's be honest.
I mean, none of these generations were actually defined by 5% uplifts. M2 was solidly like 20% faster for the CPU. It was 35% faster in graphics. It featured 50% more memory bandwidth. M3, another like 15ish to 20% uplift in CPU performance. The graphics saw massive architectural improvements, while the raw performance went up by around 20%. You got hardware accelerated ray tracing, mesh shading, dynamic caching, which for depending on the task, for example, for something like Blender, would double your performance or more. M4 kept those disproportionate improvements for stuff like hardware accelerated ray tracing. So he even downplays what he exactly is showing.
This is a joke. It's a bit like if you were a world-class runner, but then the way that you prove you're a world-class runner is by comparing your speed to when you were 8 years old.
Now, there's another funny way companies compare to their previous selves, specifically smartphone companies when talking about the glass and how tough the glass is. Surely you've heard this before.
So I watched this video. I will react to it mostly by the end and when there is a certain graph coming up, because I do want to get through this video at some point. You know what? I'm going to actually make it even a bit faster, 1.65.
new smartphone or this new glass is twice as shatter resistant as the previous year. Wow. And then the next year it'll come out and say this new glass is now twice as scratch resistant as last year. That is amazing. How are they making such massive improvements in the quality of the glass every time? But it's not as insane when you realize that scratch resistance and shatter resistance are inversely related. So the more of one you have, the less of the other you have. Think of it like this. If you want something to be super, super scratch resistant and super, super hard, that makes it more likely to be a little bit brittle and shatter. But if you want it to be less likely to shatter, you make it a little bit softer, which makes it more likely to scratch. So instead of making some huge improvement every single year like the headlines might have you think, it's actually more two different graphs, one for scratch resistance and one for shatter resistance, and they kind of do this. Scratch resistance does this every single year, and shatter resistance...
Okay, so this is actually not true. If you actually test these screens, it's very rare that one feature will get this noticeably worse from one year to the next. It would more be like, wee, like that, right? While also always going up, something that he for some reason omits. But again, I'm not here to defend the companies. I'm just trying to talk to you guys as smarter consumers. There is a level of understanding that you need here, which I think Marques rightly provides, right? Which is that the harder you make something to reduce scratches, right? Usually it will make it more brittle. Now, this is technically absolutely true, but there are other things to consider, like how thick is the glass? Is there an extra protective layer of something else? Maybe you achieved the scratch resistant through a layer of ceramic on top, for example, while underneath that glass actually gets a little bit softer and becomes much more difficult to shatter, right? Because a piece of smartphone glass is, contrary to what many people believe, it's not just glass is glass. That has been wrong for years and years, and I know that Jarek everything likes to say it. It's much more complicated than that, but just because I'm saying it's more complicated doesn't mean it's magic. It will have a lot of the limitations of glass. Even sapphire glass is not perfect because sapphire is very hard, very difficult to scratch. Usually you will not even use pure sapphire because pure sapphire can be difficult to work with, can be very expensive, and will be very easy to shatter, especially if it's a super thin layer of sapphire. So yes, glass is glass. And yes, shatter and scratch resistance are inversely related, but that ignores the numerous of improvements and other technological changes that the screen will go through throughout the years. If Corning was only doing this, right? Whether we are talking about Gorilla Glass or a more specific solution like Ceramic Shield, which is, it's not a rebranded Gorilla Glass that Apple uses, but it is still related to other solutions that that Corning makes, including for other manufacturers. But it's just like, and I do want to call that out here, like looking at, for example, my Twitter, looking at my bookmarks. Okay, so yeah, Greg's Gadgets rightfully points out some of the mistakes here. Unified memory isn't just a marketing term. Ceramic Shield 2 is literally more scratch and shatter resistant. Now, obviously, that's when we're talking about multi-generational updates, right? If you combine that too, we'll get to some of these changes later on. But he does also comment, for example, I'm not sure if this is posted here, but for example, with Jarek Everything's reaction that, oh yeah,
Level 6 and Sapphire usually scratches at a level 8 or 9. And as you can clearly see from my picks, the level 6 marks are basically non-existent, and we also barely see any scratches at a level 7. So I can't even say the thing I always say.
But then when we look at Marques's video, later on he will claim the thing that he says, like light grooves at 6 with deeper grooves at level 7. He doesn't even adapt. And then that's despite specifically covering Ceramic Shield 2 later on.
Does this every single year, but in the opposite phase, because they're not able to do huge improvements of both at the same time. There is some material science and they're both getting slightly better, but that's an easier way to understand that. It's not as crazy as it sounds. It's no coincidence that, the first generation of this dramatic new Ceramic Shield for the iPhone was 4 times better in drop resistance than any previous iPhone. And then when they finally got to Ceramic Shield Generation 2, it was 3 times more scratch resistant
But
specifically.
did you notice that nobody is coming out and saying that the new ceramic shield is dramatically more brittle? Oh, chilling with tech. Hey, homie.
Every single one scratches at level 6 with deeper grooves at a level 7.
It's going all right. I'm a little bit less pissed because I expended a lot of my energy early on in the video, and MKBHD's portions are better than Aaron's, Mrwhosetheboss's, but this is not a good video.
Because it's still glass.
Hey, at least tech
Yeah,
companies are
so, okay, so he goes into more detail about it on his own channel. You can look that up. He does cover some of the things that I have already covered, including even the quote from Jarek Everything. So the portion he actually cut out here kind of works, but that graph that he shows here is wildly overstated. But yeah, so he himself now does one of those lies by having a confusing graph, by, for example, not labeling it, right? Remember how people complained, well, Apple wasn't doing exact labeling on the X and Y axis of Apple's benchmark graphs? Well, apparently Marquez doesn't need it either.
Specifically, every single one scratch.
companies are generous enough to upgrade the storage on our phones and laptops every few years.
The new iPad Pro comes with double the storage, which is now 256 gigabytes.
Oh, thanks, Apple. Oh, so we got $200 more expensive. So they position it to you like they're doing you some kind of massive favor, when in fact, all they've really done is stopped selling the cheaper, lower storage model, and so you have to pay more. But at least
Yeah,
that
that's the thing they did on the iPhone 15 Pro Max, for example. They stopped selling the 128 gigabyte model, which was $1099 for the Pro Max, and then they started at $1199, but they started with 256 gigabytes. Something that Greg's Gadgets rightfully points out to in this portion here, for example, is that the iPad Pro went up in price here primarily not because of storage considerations, but because it got tandem OLED, widely considered to be pretty much the best mobile screen in the industry. And yeah, that's why it went up in price. You can argue whether it's worth it, and you can rightfully argue both ways, but one thing you should not try to do is downplay the iPad Pro's storage increase just as like marketing fluff, because yes, it happened during price increases, which were mostly related to something else. But then you look at something like the iPhone 17, for example, which got a ProMotion screen, which got a chip upgrade like it usually does, modem upgrades, and it got double the storage, 128 to 256, and it got that at the exact price level. And mind you, when it comes to these prices, nobody's ever asking about the inflation that's happening behind the scenes. People always expect prices to stay the same or even go down, but when they go up, nobody's asking that in the context of, well, but what does it mean versus the overall price trend of the actual components inside? We know new chips are getting more expensive. We know even though OLED has come down in price relatively to the entire cost of the product, getting a really high quality LTPO OLED is still expensive. Doing tandem LTPO OLED on an iPad for the very first time, that was expensive too.
It's kind of easy to see through. The one that I find much tougher is what I would call the efficiency improvement trap. And it's a specific problem with the way that performance improvements are sold to us. Every year, we hear a very similar story.
Performance-wise, we're seeing a 23% boost and 20% more efficiency too.
So even just ignoring for a second how they slipped in that little up to behind him, even though he didn't actually say it, this guy is very clearly implying that this chip lets you game with about 20% faster performance while your battery lasts 20% longer.
No. That's not what it means. Efficiency is performance per watt. I'm sorry if you're too dumb to understand that. If you were saying it at 20% reduction in power, which it does not say, it's an up to 20% improvement in power efficiency versus previous generation. It specifically does not call out power consumption. It calls out efficiency, which is power performance per watt. It's a metric that you, as a tech YouTuber, should be explaining to people better, and maybe companies too, but it's 100% not a lie. Efficiency and power consumption are not the same thing.
So not only you're getting smoother
Does
gameplay,
Aaron know about tech?
but you're also getting better battery.
Did he start his channel yesterday?
like while doing it.
But the important thing to understand is you don't get both. If your efficiency goes up by 20%,
Yeah.
but then you're using all of that extra efficiency to get this 20% extra performance, then what you're actually getting is the same battery life. So when you then bundle that back in with the fact that the entire thing is only up to 23% faster and up to 20% more efficient, and what we're really often talking about in these kinds of situations is an average expected improvement of like 5% to your performance and
That's bullshit. Like,
your end battery life.
wait, but that's also in different tasks. Like, a lot of it also is at the highest level of power consumption, which is not where you mostly run your device. On the efficiency curve, it's much less likely that you get super significant gains at like about 40 to 60% max power. Is that a little bit misleading? Yeah, but those companies also give you battery life estimates, so you should at least look at them before you decide that efficiency equals power consumption equals battery life.
Surgical grade stainless steel, aircraft grade aluminum.
Yeah, these terms mean nothing because, yeah, stainless steel in surgical rooms is stainless steel. Aerospace aluminum can mean more. It usually means 7000 series aluminum rather than 6000 series aluminum, which will give you more tensile strength usually. But then again, don't forget that aero-grade aluminum actually needs to have some other characteristics than your smartphone usually. So it doesn't mean actually the best thing for your smartphone. Again, Marquez got all the better topics. Man, Aaron, you really shorted yourself on your own channel.
Military toughness. Tech companies feel like they're always like, super excited to sell you something.
Military toughness can actually come. You see how these guys bundle different terms, even though these terms will have wildly different implications. Military grade strength usually will refer to some kind of military test, right? Like some kind of dirt resistance, some kind of super hard drop test. In the past, we even got smartphones from the likes of Samsung that were deliberately built for like the military. I'm sure they still do, but they're much less marketed to the regular consumer.
Maybe the most premium materials on planet Earth forged in an oven at 1,000,000 degrees that only the most exacting customer could possibly accept. But you know what's funny about that? There's actually nothing super special about any of those things. In fact, they're actually quite common. Like most airplanes, it's true. They use a whole bunch of 6000 and 7000 series aluminum because those alloys are super strong and light and cheap enough for mass production and good quality. But that does also mean that when your phone uses aerospace grade aluminum, you know, it's technically true, but that's also true about a Razor scooter. And a whole lot of the stainless steel you'll come across in life is just 316L steel, which is an alloy that is one of many that is pure enough.
Yeah, it's one of the most common things on planet Earth when it comes to things that we humans have created. That is correct, yeah.
And high quality enough to be used in surgical tools and in the iPhone 14 Pro's rails and in most kitchen sinks that you come across.
Yep.
Which technically means the kitchen sink is also surgical grade stainless steel.
Yep.
It's not lying technically, but now you know.
The truth is, the specs of tech products are chosen around how those products are going to be marketed. And that's kind of a given. It's just
that
business.
is not entirely correct. No. Like, this entirely ignores the fact that engineering teams will also want to see actual improvements. It ignores the fact that these terms must actually be somewhat verifiable in reviews. If it was just marketing terms that could be very easily misproven or could actually be like could cause big confusion and big anger from consumers. No, it's not just marketing. And even then, just saying it's marketing also implies a level of maliciousness that I don't think all marketing deserves.
The issue is that very often in today's world,
marketing is how we mostly consume information when it comes to stuff we want to buy because somebody wants to sell us something. Marketing can be somewhat misleading, but there are ways that we are protected, especially in the West, when it comes to malicious and misleading advertisement.
specs that make a product the most marketable are not the specs that are most useful to a user. Take thickness. The spec that matters here, really, is the maximum thickness. You want to know how thick the new phone or laptop is at its thickest point.
No, I actually want to know how thick it is where I touch it. Because I'm not wearing skinny jeans. Now, if this was 5 centimeters thick, the camera bump, I would agree. But the fact that this is still under 1.5 centimeter, and because of that, I'm getting a much slimmer overall body, I'm willing to accept that compromise. Can it be a bit misleading when we are talking about products that are specifically built around slimness, like the iPhone Air, which obviously has to cheat a little and put a lot of its component in the plateau? But then when you think about the iPhone Air, its plateau actually adds to how comfortable it is. Again, that girl I was showing tech to used the iPhone Air, and she was delighted by how thin it is without me even having to say that to her. And at no point did she comment, well, but the camera bump is thicker. No, she just rested her finger against it.
Because that's going to determine what bags or pockets you can fit inside.
Nope, it does not determine what bags it goes into. Like, what fucking bag are you using that cannot fit a camera bump that's like 3-4 millimeters thicker?
The spec that companies talk about is thickness at a product's thinnest point. And as soon as that genie's out of the bottle, you can call it whatever you want to. Like Apple calls the iPhone Air the thinnest iPhone ever. And while that's true for this section of the body here, it's not true for the whole phone. I've got an iPhone 7 here, which is thicker than the iPhone 6, by the way. But still, this is thinner than the iPhone Air when you factor in the cameras.
Yeah, it's this is the iPhone 7, true. The iPhone 6 was 6.1 millimeters.
And it's not like you can take them off. It's just such dumb logic. Like,
but you don't touch it. That's the point. For comfort of your device, the fact that you only touch it down there and actually can rest your finger against that actually makes this super nice.
If we carry on this train of thought, then what's to stop Apple at the next iPhone launch event taking all the rest of the components in the body and shoving them into one massive block at the end that you have to hold?
Yeah, because that would now be not comfortable. That would not be a well-balanced product. And that is something that reviewers would then call out, because it would actually be bad marketing.
Like a camera grip, but then calling the phone 5 times thinner than the last
Yeah,
iPhone.
you see, that would be ridiculous, because that would actually prevent it from going into your bag.
Because all that's left in this part is the display. And then you've got Honor, who marketed their Magic V5 as world's slimmest foldable. But then people got it in their hands, put it side by side with Samsung's foldable, and found that that was actually slimmer. Want to know why? Because Honor, in their measurements, excluded not just the camera bump, but also the outer and the inner screen protector.
You see how Apple's term, right, was actually just, it's an opinion, right? We measure the thinner point. Okay. Here, they deliberately left out parts. You see how those things, like, he should have started with Honor and said, this is the more egregious way. And then there is a slightly misleading way, which is more how Apple treats their Air products, right? And I would have been totally fine with it. But he had to start with Apple. He had to make Apple the boogeyman again, because that's what sells the video.
The one that you're not actually even allowed to take off yourself. That's not the only pointless spec, though. Like, screen brightness. It's become an arms race to just be the one quoting the highest number of nits possible. But the more the companies focus on just reaching a really high peak nit number, the less that number actually tells you about how bright the screen is day to day.
Yeah, again, he's mentioning Apple's number, but 3,000 nits is actually, you see how Apple actually advertises it as peak outdoor brightness? A lot of these numbers, the 4,500, the 6,000 nits, these actually refer to 1% screen brightness levels for HDR content under auto brightness, right? While Apple's 3,000 nits is also not typical screen brightness, which is 1,000 nit, a spec that Apple actually still gives you and very much is front and center on their website. Like, you see how he has to push Apple into this.
Race to just be the one quoting the highest number of nits possible. But the more the companies focus on just reaching a really high peak nit number, the less that number actually tells you about how bright the screen is day to day. They could literally be describing how bright 1 pixel on the screen could go while playing HDR content in direct sunlight.
Yeah, that's exactly what the 4,500 and 6,000 nits numbers are derived from, not Apple's 3,000 nits number.
3 seconds. So this, for example, is an Honor Magic 8 Pro. The company makes a pretty big deal about how this has a 6,000 nit peak brightness. That's the figure that's marketed. But if we pull up a plain white image on this phone and put it next to a Samsung Galaxy S25 Ultra, which only advertises a 2,600 nit peak brightness.
Which, by the way, is also not the correct number. The correct number is closer to 1,1600.
Can't actually tell the difference at all in this day-to-day scenario. These are both on Macs, by the way. So when you're looking at brightness numbers, just get rid of peak brightness. Look at typical brightness. And when it comes to phone cameras, what mostly matters is sensor size.
Which is funny because Apple gives that, but you still put Apple up there because they gave you a number that was for peak outdoor brightness with auto brightness to compensate for in shorter bursts when maybe you get under the most intense sunlight. It's not an HDR brightness number. They do have a separate HDR brightness number. They did not let that number creep up over the years pointlessly. They still keep it at 1600 nits on the iPhone, only moved it up to 2000 nits on the Studio Display XDR.
And so the more light and the more real detail that your shots have. What most companies spend far more time talking about is resolution, which
again, I can name you one company that doesn't, but we'll get to that.
At a certain point doesn't matter at all on a phone. Like the last 4 generations of Samsung phones have had a 200 megapixel resolution. They're still shooting their actual photos in 12. And don't even get me started.
But there are 24 megapixel modes. There are other modes in the camera. And you yourself have advertised it. You yourself have mentioned these features in your reviews as positives. You have even talked about how 8K video is a plus point for Samsung, even though in every 8K comparison footage that you have shown, it looked worse than 4K shot in an iPhone.
Maximum zoom magnification. Look at this page for the Nothing Phone 4a Pro. The headline feature, the number one thing being used to sell this phone is...
This is correct. Maximum magnification means absolutely nothing, because in software you can theoretically zoom as far in as to just 1 pixel, right? So, which would be like a 1000x zoom or even more, right? If it's 1000 and 1000 on each, no, that would just be 1 million. So it would be like 4000 times 4000. Yeah, it would be like 4 to 8000x zoom. Yeah, this is absolutely meaningless. This actually uses a pretty small and I believe only a 3x zoom camera. So you're doing like 50 plus X zoom here in software. Yeah, this is bullshit.
World's first 140 times ultra zoom. Oh my goodness. I mean, my iPhone only has 40 times max zoom, so it's gonna get cooked, right? Okay, zoom all the way to 40 times on the iPhone, 40 times on the Nothing. Oh my God. Right, yeah, so it's exactly what we expected. The Nothing phone, regardless of whether you use the AI enhancement or not, just looks worse. It's just not capturing as much information as the iPhone, and AI can't help you there. Let me make something very clear. How far your phone can digital zoom has literally zero correlation with how good of a camera it is. What it actually does correlate with, though, is how low a company's standards are for what counts as a photo.
Yeah, it's funny how you didn't mention that in your reviews when you are when you are actually testing these phones. But yeah, this is actually a really good point by Aaron.
Because I could literally go back to the first smartphone I ever owned if I wanted, take a photo, and just keep cropping in until all I can see is a single brown smudge. And technically, that could be 300 times digital zoom.
Yeah.
Best zoom camera in the world, everyone.
Yeah, correct. Aaron, hey, you did your full research. And hey, you did actually a company-to-company comparison. Hey, why didn't you do that during your other 4 parts of the video?
Oh my God, I can't do this anymore.
Neither can
So
I.
speaking of phone cameras, last but not least is the classic shot on a smartphone trope. First of all, several companies have already been caught lying about like sample images that were supposed to be shot on that smartphone.
Yeah, okay, you see, kudos to Marquez here. He's first bringing up an actual egregious lie before he gets to the example where it's more about misleading someone. But I'll criticize that criticism.
Or just licensed from some professional photo shoot somewhere on a random DSLR, which is already crazy. But even the ones that aren't lying do feel like they're kind of stretching the truth with the amount of extra hardware that's being added to.
But this is also unfair because a DSLR will also have additional hardware. For example, when we are looking at reviewing a keynote, right? Samsung captures their latest keynotes on Samsung with a lot of stabilizing tech and good lighting, and Apple does the same. And Apple has actually been able to do so for a few more years because their video quality has always been better. Basically, like a good full 2 years ahead. This is bullshit. This is complete bullshit because this actually becomes super misleading. You should be using that extra zoom number, for example, to advertise this periscope, not the actual smartphone. Because at that point, it also begs the question, why don't you just make that as an accessory for every single older phone, given as zoom features going back multiple generations?
Shoot it on a smartphone. Like the whole point, I feel like, of this, awesome piece of content was shot on a smartphone is to sort of inspire and empower you to...
But most of these phones are actually captured just by regular photographers, basically in like point and shoot scenarios, maybe with like a tripod, but then again, a regular camera will also be helped by a tripod.
Shoot your own awesome photos and videos with that tiny sensor and lens that fits in your pocket everywhere you go. But when there's a massive external stabilization rig and huge lenses and filters and all sorts of other things added to
There are no huge lenses. involved. The lens is still the one. Wait, what did you
That fits in
say?
your pocket everywhere you go. But when there's a massive external stabilization rig and huge
Yeah, it's stabilization rig. That's true. Again, this will also apply to any regular camera. They will not use in-body stabilization for events like these.
lenses and filters and all sorts of
Oh,
other
huge lenses. Not really. Not always. Sometimes there will be like one of those zoom lenses, but you can see here it's just using the iPhone's regular cameras.
things added to the phone and millions of dollars of lighting and set design.
Yeah, again, these baseline features will also apply to you using a professional camera on set.
To make that all possible, I guess it's still impressive, but it also kind of defeats the purpose a little.
This setup, by the way, for a 360-degree shot, that would be much more complicated and much more costly with professional video cameras. You wouldn't be able to actually pack them as close together. You would have bigger gaps basically in between them. Plus cost, plus energy, plus often cameras need a fan to even cool themselves a little. So in this way, a smartphone, especially under heat, would work. There's also benefits, like you can use a smartphone, for example, much closer to the dirt because it doesn't literally need as much physical space.
I can almost guarantee there are features disabled on those phones to make those accessories work. Like if I'm shooting with all that stuff, I'm disabling the built-in stabilization if I have a 5-figure jib to shoot with. Like the only thing
Exactly. But this is not as misleading. By that point, it would be, you could say it's misleading that Sony advertises its cameras because you're not using its in-body image stabilization or even its in-lens default image stabilization for a professional shoot where you will have a lens that no regular consumer will have, where it will be on a crazy stabilization rig that destroys the shit out of any tripod.
from the original phone that you're still using to shoot is just the sensor, technically.
But hey, massive respect to Marques here to actually mentioning the egregious example first, which is companies actually saying this was shot on our smartphone, which was not shot on your smartphone, and then transitioning to the more questionable, more opinion-based, oh, is that more misleading or actually lying example. Aaron, that's something you can learn from.
Then is it still shot on a smartphone? I guess technically yes, but I'm now actually way less impressed.
So, treat everything that these tech companies tell you with a heavy dose of salt.
And treat everything that Aaron says with way more salt than even Salt Bay can disgustingly spray all over himself.
You don't need to
And
upgrade
yeah,
every
I
other
know he's not spraying, but I'm saying spraying because I'm meaning something else.
year. Nothing's actually getting 8 times better. And when you see a company bragging about
There have been examples where stuff has become 8 times better, but okay. I mean, if Aaron says nothing has ever gotten 8 times better, that's fine.
their maximum zoom,
The iPad 1 to iPad 2 did not get a 9 times improvement in GPU performance. Aaron told us that, guys.
run for the hills. If they can spot you, at least you'll be super low resolution. Thanks to Marques for joining forces.
But hey, I gave Marques respect for the truth, respect to Aaron for losing weight and becoming pretty buff. I'm on the same journey, but I'm starting from more than this. Here, he also deliberately pulled out his stomach. So we'll see. Like, this is 90 days. I'm going on a similar 90-day thing right now. About 10 days into it, but had to pause it for a few days with the family. We'll see. But yeah, respect to that. Disrespect for so many other things in this video. And guys, because we are now 3 hours into the stream, I assume most of you have now checked out, which I fully understand. This was way longer than I expected it to be. Thank you still to anyone who was able to make the journey with me, whether you're watching now live or you're watching later later as a VOD. It means so much to me. Before I sign off, I think I've summarized every single one of my topics as much as I could. I'll try to do 2 streams this week, maybe 3 if there's something emergency-wise, like Tim Cook announcing John Turnus taking over as CEO. I doubt that, but I'll keep myself ready. I'll be there on Sunday when the new Power On newsletter drops, and then maybe Wednesday, Thursday, something like that. Again, with my mind open to doing a stream sooner if there is more content in between. As always, subscribe to the channel, like the video, share it out with anybody who you think might enjoy it. Don't just comment live. If you're watching this later, also comment in the regular comment section. And you can support this channel directly whenever you catch me live. Leave a super chat or super sticker. Consider becoming a channel member. Shout out to all our MarkCheck Pro Max members, Steve, Angelica, Max Maximus, and Jonathan. And of course, you can join our Discord, which will start taking calls. You'll just have to make sure you inform me in the super chat, because I'm not going to be constantly switching between Discord here and OBS there. I'll just open Discord. If one of you guys in the live chat tells me, hey, I'm there, I would like to comment on this and that topic, and especially if you're somebody who has already been in the Discord and you're somebody I trust, then you're even more likely to be accepted. If you make it a super chat, you're even more likely to be accepted. Just FYI. And of course, let me know what else you would like to see me cover next. Definitely whatever other Apple news will come up, but if there's something else that interests you, maybe more comparisons between the M5 family and the X2 Elite Extreme, more comparison between those chips and also Intel's Panther Lake, more content on console or gaming graphics, whatever, just let me know. And if it's something that also interests me, that I also know a little bit about, and there are actually new news about it right now, I'll consider that. And I think we're all that much better for it if my content is not just something that I decide only for myself, but it's something that we can discuss back and forth. It's something that interests you. It's something that grows the community. And beyond all that, thank you so much. I'll catch you guys next time. This is Mark Tech, tuning out.